Alright, chapter 20 is called Enemy Lines. If you weren't familiar with my online reputation before picking up this book, you might find this chapter intriguing. But if you're reading this because you're invested in the online world, perhaps to an unhealthy degree, there's a chance you skipped ahead specifically to this part. To that I say tisk tisk, it's important to read the whole story first. That said, I think it's time I talk about the relationship I formed years ago with a well-known leftist and online streamer, someone I debated numerous times over the past decade in videos that collectively garnered millions of views. Stephen Bonnell, also known as Destiny. Uh, okay. I always reckon our online personas were reflected well in one of my all-time favorite movies, Best of Enemies. The film followed the rivalry between William F. Buckley and Gore Vidal. Arguably the two people who invented the entire political space Steve and I would both come to inhabit. Albeit as the Tumblr and Ventrilla Rays remix, Vidal was an ardent progressive who wrote famous works like Mira Breckenridge, the story of a transgender woman who sets out to destroy gender norms and usurp social order. He published in 1968 when such provocations actually carried risk. As for William F. Buckley, he was the founder of National Review, formerly one of America's premier conservative news outlets. Sensing the potential for spectacle, ABC News, which was struggling for ratings, decided to televise live debates between the two mortal enemies during the height of election season. And it worked. The format sparked a new era of political commentary, one rooted more in performance and persona than persuasion. In many ways, those debates were a preview of what today's discourse has devolved into, only with more flair and arguably more self-awareness about the damage being done. In one infamous exchange, Vidal called Buckley a crypto-Nazi, prompting Buckley to snap, "Now listen, you queer, stop calling me a crypto-Nazi, or I'll sock you in the goddamn face and you'll stay plastered." Buckley will go on to regret the comment for the rest of his life, seeing it as a betrayal of his own principles. Okay. Calling those you disagree with Nazis and queers certainly did not begin with YouTube blood sports or Twitter flame wars. ABC News ratings reportedly doubled during the now infamous televised 1968 debates. It was intoxicating to watch these people destroy one another, and the appetite for that kind of spectacle hasn't gone away. Over time, the cycle of online politics became depressingly predictable, almost comforting in its repetition. Filming videos, debating, giving interviews, it all started to feel boring. Same talking points, same fallacies, same characters with new names. What eventually held my interest wasn't the spectacle, but the people behind it and their inner worlds. Matt Tyrnauer, one of the interview subjects in Best of Enemies, made a fascinating observation about Gore Vidal's final years. He noted that Vidal's later writings were full of middle fingers to William F. Buckley. He simply couldn't let it go. When Buckley died, Vidal told him to rest in hell. Tyrnauer remarked, "It seems a little far-fetched to say that Gore Vidal was waiting around for Buckley to die so he could have the last word, but I promise you that he took great pleasure in that. He was not satisfied if he didn't have something to fight against, and at the end of his life, I think he was fighting against the ghosts of all these enemies." Tyrnauer went on to say, "The young have forgotten him, his books weren't being read anymore. These figures become most interesting when they're not listened to so much, because then there's a kind of big silence inside themselves. A lot of people in politics are like that, clinging to grudges and purpose long after anyone else is listening. While I always had some affinity for Buckley, I definitely ended up with a few traits of Vidal's. My marriage had failed, and part of me would have rather died than admit to such a crushing defeat of the traditional values I claim to believe in. I figured I could have found a way to balance this, or at least hold off the tide while I got my life together. Living with my parents and staying at the cabin, I paid the bills by making YouTube videos and live streaming. I hated it. I did my best to be honest and factual, but I think many could tell my heart wasn't in it anymore. Looking back, I may be a dramatic case, but nothing illustrates the sickness of social media better than those moments. Yes, it kept me afloat financially, but it also poisoned my mind and delayed any real healing. Sometimes I wondered if I would have sunk so deep into depression had I never been online at all. Without the pressure to perform or the constant flood of autumn family photos and highlight reels, I doubt I would have. The irony is, I wasn't even fooled by any of it. I knew most people were posturing. Yet I felt a deep sense of existential dread that people were about to find out just how badly I was posturing. And if they did, what then? How would I take care of my child? As Terranera of Vidal said of Vidal, there's a silence that settles when applause fades, a silence that can be unbearable. A lot of people in the media are deeply hurt, and when they fall from grace, it often gets worse. There are two ways people seem to deal with that silence: denial or dragging others into their hell. I chose to pretend everything was fine, but others I knew, poisoned by years online, had turned bitter. Forgotten and betrayed, their pain hardened into anger, eventually hatred. With their real lives crumbling around them, they made it their mission to expose flaws, stir drama, and tear people down, particularly those whose stars were still shone. Okay, so basically the jealousy is showing here, huh? Alright, anyways. Some were progressive activists, others were self proclaimed Christians, continuing the traditions of the Pharisees. They built their entire platforms around cruelty. You've probably seen them before drama YouTubers or bloodsport types creating the lowest form of content, leaking people's home addresses, private emails, or intimate photos. They still have souls, buried somewhere beneath it all, but they're very obviously consumed by some sort of malignant spirit feasting on what's left of them. A pitiable existence, hovering like a vulture over other people's misery. Yet one that mirrored my own inner state as I live in constant paranoia of becoming their next meal. My worst fears were confirmed when I discovered emails sent to drama channels about my failed marriage. But it wasn't just Lauren got divorced. No, that would be too boring. Instead, the rumors claimed I spent my marriage gallivanting across the globe, cheating on my husband, got pregnant with another man's child, and stole our son while my ex sat so heartbroken and betrayed. In retrospect, it's also stupid I almost have to laugh, but at the time, I was in full panic mode. My reputation was how I survived financially. I felt like one bad rumor, one badly worded tweet, or anonymous tip could unravel everything. The lies didn't even need to be good, they just had to sound plausible enough to stick. I scrolled endlessly, trying to predict what people might believe next, as if I could somehow control the narrative by staying one step ahead. I knew I had court documents, messages, and evidence to disprove every false claim. Yet the thought of airing them publicly felt unbearable. I hadn't even told my family the full story. I hadn't told anyone. Alright, pause here, right? Because let's say someone was in this situation. Because I feel like a lot of people are in this situation where they're scared of, like, something being exposed about themselves, right? Like, obviously, like, people make mistakes, don't like to be exposing yours. Like, now we even have social norms nowadays and rules where, like, oh, don't talk about a woman's age or a man's salary or, something like what else? Like those sort of things, you just those are sort of things that you just do it, and if you do it to someone and then like they can get offended by it for some reason, right? And they don't even want to say it out loud, but it's literally because of this. They're scared to be honest, all right? They're scared to be honest because they have flaws. They don't want those flaws to be exposed. But what I don't get is like why are people so scared of exposing their flaws, right? I mean, it's obvious because isn't it because like we have this environment where we just like tear other people down for the flaws they have. And then it's like that's why, right? They're scared of that. And so now that kind of like creates a society where you kind of like tread on eggshells at that point. And at that point, it's like, how do you even love each other? Like, how do you connect with each other at that point, right? Like, honestly, if someone has flaws, I don't give a crap. And to me, that makes more human. I'm more of a type that like, I just want to like show everything, to show people like who I am really. And then like if I do something wrong, at least they can tell me, right? But at the same time, like doing it that way, you might expose other people in the process. Because if you want, we're connected as a society, so if you expose yourself, you kind of expose someone else, and then they'll be like, no, how that's so like, and then they become offended or all that like bull crap, and it gets too complicated. Like at that point, then what do you do? Anyways, sure, my audience included plenty of decent, well-meaning people, but mixed in were also those who thrived on cruelty, who treated public humiliation like a spectator sport. I hadn't exactly wrote out the welcome mat for them, but I didn't kick them out either. Their outrage was useful, their loyalty convenient, and now I was going to be the spectacle of the day. To a degree, I know I probably deserved it. I could place myself squarely alongside every influencer across the political spectrum who had been devoured by the very zealots they once leveraged. It wouldn't just be the fact that I was divorced, no, that was too simple. They would turn my life into a morality play, convinced that I alone was to blame. Nuance, irrelevant, facts, optional. All that mattered was whichever version of the story made my downfall most satisfying to watch. I knew the drill. The walls were closing in on me, and that dark vision of my future felt increasingly inevitable. I rationed every bit of positive emotion I had, saving it for my son and the internet when I needed to smile for money. On my nights off, I'd turn on a salt lamp, lie down in my A-frame cabin, and continue my ritual of smoking myself into a daze to forget the world. Alright, pause again, bro. Because another thing I've been struggling with is how do you smile? Every time I smile, I look fake, right? My smile is like I try, and then, oh, what the fuck? Like, people say, Just recently, I had a performance, right? And as I was performing, I had to smile, obviously, and then I smiled. I thought it was okay, but then my friends come in like, "Yo, your smile looks like a customer service smile. It look fake." I'm like, "What the fuck?" Okay, yeah, maybe it's fake, but how can you tell? Or like then how do I make it not fake? At the same time, how what the fuck? Uh, all right, maybe then yeah, all right. I had told almost no one in my industry about my life unraveling, except for one person, Steven, the left-wing streamer I used to debate. In recent years, he's garnered significant amounts of fame or infamy, depending on who you ask. Often featured on Jubilee shows Vice Media and Piers Morgan. One of the earliest full-time streamers, Stephen helped pioneer the online political debate space, particularly from a liberal or progressive standpoint. We disagreed on just about everything, and generally hated each other for a long period of time. I'm not entirely sure why I chose to tell him about my situation. I think in part it was the sense that he might be the only one in the media entangled life who couldn't see my circumstances as pathetic. Honestly, he was the only leftist I really spoke to at all. Most of my peers were right-wing and viewed divorced single mothers like The Walking Dead. Our stories were over. At best, they pitied us. At worst, we were framed as part of civilization's collapse. Meanwhile, Stephen's progressive worldview didn't just avoid shaming divorce, it barely acknowledged the institution of marriage at all. He claimed he was polyamorous, or at least something close to it, and didn't place much personal value on monogamy. I didn't entirely understand how he approached relationships or life from where I stood. It all seemed alien. By the minimum, I knew his lens on the world wouldn't mirror the self-condemnation I had been feeding myself for years. I suppose another reason I started talking to him was that he seemed professionally honest about his own dysfunction. After years in conservative media, I'd been repeatedly let down by my so-called heroes. They all had their demons, drug addiction, affairs, personal betrayals, and scams. Behind the carefully curated image of righteousness, they were just as flawed as the people they condemned. And now I was no different, a fraud. Pretending I was still married, still a hero to the cause, when in truth I was backed into a corner, silently grappling with my own brokenness. Stephen, on the other hand, would miss debates and openly admit he'd accidentally done meth the night before, thinking it was ecstasy. I'd seen similar spirals among right-wing figures, quiet implosions, disappearing for days, overdoing drugs, only they blame it on food poisoning or a vague mental health crisis. It was all spun into some dramatic story of censorship or victimhood. Stephen may have been a degenerate to the conservative spectators, but he was honest about it. In fact, I argue lying is the most degenerate trait of all, especially the self-righteous kind. At least Stephen owned his mess. There was a strange virtue in that. We chatted a bit over Discord, mostly trading thoughts on potential debates or critiquing each other's videos, nothing deeper. That changed after countless online arguments when we finally met in person to do a live stream while I was in Washington, D.C. for an episode of a show called Timcast RL. After the stream, we ended up in a dingy dive bar in Virginia, surrounded by people chain smoking, scratching old lotto tickets. I wore jeans and a black turtleneck, neat and deliberate. Stephen showed up in sweatpants and a worn-out hoodie with his streaming logo on it, his curly brown hair a mess like he just rolled out of bed. His drink preferences were as unhinged as his Twitter feed, Coca-Cola, hot chocolate, or straight shots. I stuck to vodka sodas while we screamed at each other for an hour, the very obvious right-wing crowd egging me on. Later, we tried walking to a gas station to buy cigarettes and got hopelessly lost in the freezing cold. It took us ages to find our way back. Near midnight, we were shivering, climbing over razor wire fences, trespassing, even stumbling into a barnyard where we drunkenly petted horses and chatted with them. We laughed like kids at the silliness of it all, in between shouting matches over who was to blame for the mess. At some point, Stephen lost both his wallet and car keys, which I somehow miraculously found in the middle of an empty stretch of road. I had a flashback of us sitting there hours ago, across from one another, arguing over which direction to go while the chill set in like Polly and Christopher in the Sopranos episode, Pine Barrens. I figured the keys must have slipped out of his sweatpants pocket. Bingo. Eventually, we made it back to the bar, climbed into the car, and thawed out with the heat blasting. We ended up talking for a long time afterward. We both grown up in the same chaotic online ecosystem, just in different cliques. It felt like running to someone from high school you used to hate, but now you're both older and realize the drama was kind of stupid. Mostly I was just relieved to finally open up to someone who couldn't moralize or look down on me. Still, as I held back tears recounting the collapse of my marriage, my face betrayed the humiliation I was trying to suppress. I spilled it all out, timelines, what I could have done differently, calculations, how completely at odds I all felt with my ideology, my attempts to force congruency, and my eventual conclusion that my life was in some fundamental way over. Stephen just stared at me for a moment before nearly bursting out laughing. Lauren, what the actual fuck, dude? Few interventions hit harder than someone looking at you like you've completely lost your mind. He generally couldn't fathom the level of self-hatred I was carrying. Naturally, he cracked plenty of jokes about how my trad ideals were unraveling, but I think I'd almost forgotten how much I preferred laughing at tragedy to crying over it until he reminded me. It was like a pressure valve had been released. I was exhausted, and suddenly I didn't just not have to care. I could laugh too. His jokes didn't come from a place of gloating either. If anything, he was adamant that what I had been through wasn't normal. He didn't see it as some inevitable result of conservative values. For once, someone looked at me and didn't see a pro-gun woman or a failed ideology, just a person whose life had fallen apart and who maybe deserved a little grace. What might have been unremarkable comments to anyone with a healthier mindset felt to me like an oasis of kindness in a vast emotional desert. Many on the political right present themselves as emotionally invulnerable, mocking others for being soft, but the truth is they hurt too. They crave kindness just like everyone else. They're all tired of pretending they're not human, yet the longer they wear the mask of performative stoicism, the more it melts into their skin until it's no longer performance, but a prison. The desire to express emotion grows even as their ability to do so slips further out of reach. But hey, maybe it's just me, what would I know? I only spent a decade in that world. Anyways, that night when I returned to my B&B, I ran into Kian Bexty, another guest from the show and a friend. While sneaking up the stairs, he casually asked where I had been. Just out, hanging with a friend. I definitely didn't specify which friend. I felt guilty, not because I'd done anything actually wrong, but because I'd spent hours pouring my heart out to someone on the online right considered the enemy. Kian probably wouldn't have cared, but I spent so long inside the commentary echo chamber that I generally believed being friendly with a leftist, let alone confiding in one, was some sort of mortal sin. I mean, I guess it is, to that world anyway. Yeah, I knew it. I always knew that getting close to Steven would be the death of the persona I spent years building online, the nail in the coffin. After an extended downward spiral, and maybe that was the point, a quiet final act of sabotage. Not just against the idea of Lauren Southern, but against the entire logic of the world I've been swallowed by. Was I making bad choices? Maybe, but at least they were mine. For the first time, they weren't filtered through what the persona would do, or what the audience wanted. A revenge against the performance itself. On a less cynical note, I kept thinking about the left-right war that had consumed so much of my life. What if it hadn't? What if it was never that deep? If someone like Steven could sit across from me, listen without turning it into content or critique, maybe the whole thing, the tribalism, the purity test, was just performance, and maybe it didn't have to be. When I got back from DC, I slipped back into my quiet cabin life in Canada. Mom duty dishes, writing video scripts, editing for ad revenue, getting high on my high nights off every now and then. Steven would check in after our talk. Hey loser, hope you're okay. The company was without pity was a welcome change. We started talking more often, just over the phone while I cleaned the house or tweaked a thumbnail. My late nights of sobbing into the void, calling my husband to no response, smoking until the world blurred, and numbing out on Xanax slowly gave way to longer conversations about life and politics. The calls didn't fix anything, but they distracted me, and sometimes they helped me forget I was living through the extended cut of a reputational meltdown. I say that half jokingly. The real pain wasn't the public mess, it was the private one, the collapse of my family. A kind of grief that could be dulled occasionally but never erased. I cared about him, but I'd be lying if I said I was in any place for a healthier friendship, let alone anything more. Mostly, I needed someone who would actually pick up the phone. He seemed to value the conversation too. We traded stories from our respective trenches, drawing parallels, comparing notes. We didn't change each other's politics much. We just yelled, debated, and appreciated that neither of us ran when it got uncomfortable. Occasionally, we scored a small ideological win. I'd get him to read a theology book, and he pushed me to loosen my grip on certain rigid beliefs. I started ruminating on politics more than I had in years. When I got married and had a child, I wanted nothing to do with it. My focus was entirely on the life in front of me. But as my marriage unraveled, I found myself drawn back to the headlines. The crisis of the world felt less earth-shattering than the quiet collapse happening in my own home. And honestly, it gave me an excuse to talk to Steven and call it work. On a personality level, Steven and I were basically clones with slightly different backstories. Same sense of humor, same obsessive tendencies, same need to argue about abstract concepts instead of dealing with our actual lives. It wasn't healthy, but it was efficient. His brain had broken in the same ways mine had, and that made everything feel weirdly manageable. Let me pause on that for a second. I know complaining about fame can sound snobbish or tone deaf, but I really can't explain any of this without getting to how it felt. I felt like a freak because of my life on the internet. I hated fame, absolutely despised it. I didn't even have that much of it, but honestly, I came to resent even modest recognition, just as much as I did the fanatical worship that some people crave. I tried to escape the online caricature, but even in the real world, it followed me. I still felt my stupid decision to upload that first video was responsible for my marriage and life unraveling. I'd become someone you could Google forever, every failure etched into public record. It didn't even keep me honest because I couldn't find reality within the mix. Each version of me, some fan or hater made, had become another identity attached to my sense of self. It's no wonder so many Disney kids ended up lost in addiction. That kind of visibility warps your sense of self. I looked at pictures of Amanda Bynes strung out in court wearing a wig or uh or um or a bald Britney Spears swinging an umbrella at a paparazzi car and think, yeah, fair enough, have it, hope it helps. I had a fraction of their exposure and still felt the urge to snap. So interesting, actually. That's so interesting. I'm gonna pause here for a bit because I'm a little tired because it's 12:09 right now, man. Yeah, I'm gonna go sleep. Ooh. All right. Continuing on. That's part of why Steven made sense to me. He wouldn't, and honestly couldn't, judge my absurd internet entwined life. His was just as chaotic, maybe worse. Nearly every relationship he'd had was dissected by millions. His most humiliating moments, his breakups, fights, even nudes were all online. There were entire threads, videos, and articles slandering him, calling him a terrorist, a communist, someone who deserved to die. To top it off, both of us had started our careers broke, and none of the defamation lawyers or PR teams the Disney kids had. At least they got agents. We got thrown to the wolves. No handlers, no lawyers, just us and the internet. Every awful thing I had experienced, he had experienced tenfold. We'd laugh about how people we dated in the past would find gossip about us on obscure online forums and then use it to emotionally torture us for hours. And there were plenty of forums to choose from. Places where I'm allegedly a man, a secret Illuminati asset, the daughter of a rabbi from Denmark sent to subvert the white man, or possibly a terrorist who's killed a dozen refugees. Take your pick. We both intrinsically understood how unsurvivable this sort of obsessive scrutiny would be for anyone. Yet, we had felt the pain of being expected to control a world out of our hands by the people we cared about. Even the stuff that had a kernel of truth was so warped and stripped of context, it might as well have been fiction. I had to watch thousands of strangers obsessively dig up my most unflattering photos, cringeworthy messages, awkward childhood moments, even old family snapshots of me in a bikini. I mean, hell, there's a YouTube video with 16,000 views analyzing the flame war in the comment section on my WikiFeet page. I don't even know where to begin with that one, but at least I can laugh about it. The rest, not so much. I was one of the first victims of AI deepfake porn. I've had old homework assignments published online for clout. Facebook posts from people I barely knew in high school claiming I bullied them. Even coffee dates turned into Reddit AMAs. It's not that Steven and I were throwing a pity party, it's just that there aren't many people you can call to discuss the existential side effects of being internet folklore. It felt like everyone else got to live their lives without a microscope, free to mess up, move on, make connections without wondering if they'd one day be turned into content. We didn't have that freedom. Steven had made peace with it. I hadn't, though I was trying. Honestly, I didn't even want to be online anymore, but I felt trapped. This was the only job I could do without getting fired after one Google search. At least Steven had chosen this life. I envied my normal friends. Not that I was especially interested in dating apps, but I had never even had the option. By the time my media presence took off, there were already multiple fake profiles pretending to be me on Toronto's Tinder. If I went on a single date, I had to wonder when the entire internet would hear about it. Meanwhile, I watched my friends stumble through messy dating lives only to move on, the drama quietly fading into the past. Somehow they always managed to reclaim social sainthood. I envied their ability to make mistakes without being dissected for sport. If one of their exes or a jilted fling lost it, maybe they'd end up with a bat to their car. Me, I got the bat to my reputation and career, and there was no mechanic to fix that. No police report to file. I had to be perfect, and I wasn't, and not being perfect was apparently a personal betrayal to hundreds of thousands of strangers who had built an imaginary version of me they wanted to believe in. It was surreal. One day I'd be their hero, the next a villain. Some of the most vicious hate mail I've ever received came from people who once claimed to love me. I've gotten emails from men convinced I was sending them secret messages through my videos. The way I blinked, the way I glanced at the corner of the room, it was all a code telling them we were in love. Of course, some even showed up in person. Last Valentine's Day, one of them flew to my city and booked multiple restaurants, waiting for me to appear, despite never getting a single response. Bro, what the fuck? That, like, people like this genuinely exist. And I feel like I've met these kind of people before, where they decode messages like you don't say a single thing, but in their brains they warped like this weird logic. They interpret it in like what you're saying or what someone else is saying into the thing that they want, and it becomes like twisted in their own mind so far that they kind of end up being helpless to it. You know. Oh, there's a cat here. That's cute. Okay. Anyways, I have a folder titled Nut Jobs with thousands of emails like this. If I got married or did something they didn't approve of, the love would flip to fury. I just checked. It's up 9 messages. It's up 9 new messages. A few people are auto-filtered there. I don't block them anymore. It's easier to track them that way. They're psychotic, but not smart. If they come to my city, they'll email me flight details and location plans for some reason. I could write a whole book of stalker stories, but the point is, keeping tabs on the unstable has become basic survival. Here's an example of an email I received to this folder after I got married. Alright. Wow, Lauren. First of all, I'll never hurt you physically. Wow. That all of what I did was nothing to you. All the times we laughed and cried together, for example, in 17 when your grandmother died and I comforted you. I'm done. You should know that I really love you even though you betrayed me. I was right. Online friends are worthless for you. I should have never ever have tried. 2 year for trash. I should have known that you are this superficial bitch. I thought you are. Nothing conservative, nothing profound. You made the biggest mistake of your life, Lauren. He's not loving and wanting you as much as I would. Never. You may be happy for a couple of years, but not for life. We would have been a perfect match. Then you are too over-professional and too coward to tell me about it. This is not what you wanted. It's an excuse for you, nothing more. You know that you should have granted me that date. One opportunity. This will haunt you for life. Remember, I'll never stop loving you and never physically hurt you, baby. Goodbye, love of my life. I don't believe I had ever met this person. Perhaps they showed up to an event of mine and shook my hand. Maybe I wrote a post online about a death in the family that they responded to in the comments. I don't know them. Yet they've likely watched thousands of hours of my life and feel our relationship goes both ways. It's just not parasocial, it's parapsychotic. This still happens, even though I've been offline for months. A man recently contacted me, convinced we'd been in love and texting for 2 years. A scammer, likely from Bangladesh or India, had been using my name info on Telegram to con him out of money. He sent screenshots featuring messages like, "Is the 5K too hard for you to get? Do you even love me?" He says he sent over 90,000 Canadian dollars and now wants me to pay him back. He even tried involving the RCMP. That's so fucking weird, bro. Like, oh my god. Out in the world, like, you deal with people, right? You also have to deal with these stupid people. Or these, not just stupid, like, messed up. Anyways. I explained it wasn't me and showed concern, but he's still in touch with the scammer and fully believes it's real. He keeps forwarding their messages, insisting one photo looks just like me. It doesn't. I gently suggested therapy. The man replied that he would not see the rapist. The depth of his digital delusion was beyond anything I thought possible. Alright, I need to take a shower real quick. Be right back. Alright. The most devastating thing is watching someone you actually know in real life going down the rabbit hole. You're standing there in the flesh, but they're obsessed with a mirage. They fall in love with or come to hate a caricature from the internet, and all their findings get projected onto your actual body. You're expected to live up to a fantasy or apologize for a lie, and when you try to explain that version of you isn't real, they react with anger betrayal. Alright, Paul. I mean, alright, listen. Like, to some extent, what she did on the internet is still, like, even though it's like a fake version of herself, she still kind of like did it, right? And so you can't, like, at this point I would say it's not you can't really completely say that that's not really you, because like if it's still you, it's just like a you that you create as a fake for other people. Like, you can explain, I guess, that like that part isn't what you really want to be, or you don't want how others to view you, because you want but at the same time, like, you kind of did do it, you know, so you have to take some responsibility for that. There was an albeit obscure rumor going around for a while on the internet that I was pregnant with a second child that I aborted or something nasty like that. I mentioned it briefly earlier. It originated on Steven's subreddit, a forum where his fans discuss his content. Someone had posted a joke imagining what a pregnancy announcement from me might sound like. It went something like, Lauren Southern has just announced she's pregnant with a second child and says she doesn't care if it's a boy or girl, so long as it hates immigrants. Haha, very funny, very original. Such is the internet. You can't control what people say or do, and at this point, I barely even register these kinds of posts anymore. My ex-husband, however, who had clearly spent a considerable amount of time Googling my name, interpreted this post quite differently. He read it as some sort of news report or genuine announcement, hard to say. After we separated, he texted it to me demanding an explanation. It wasn't the first time. Along with this post, he screenshot an AI-generated clickbait headline claiming I was scheming about my husband, and sent it accusingly. We were only 10 years apart, but the gap in internet literacy felt enormous. I suspected he still wanted to be together, but he wouldn't apologize for leaving or do anything to fix what he broke. That much was clear. He also seemed to notice I was moving on, no longer calling just to be ignored. He wanted that power back. I think he believed that if I couldn't support myself, I'd come crawling back again. He started collecting all sorts of gossip and rumors across the internet, like the little subreddit joke, and began emailing them to my family and people I work with. Bro, he is a fucking, that's, like, he's showing who he really is at this point too, or he's showing his bad side. That is really bad. He sent the pregnancy one to the Manosphere podcast circuit. Before that, I got a call from Steven saying he received a strange email himself. Since Steven and I were publicly arguing at the time, my husband assumed he could use Steven's platform to ruin my reputation. I hadn't yet explained just how vindicative my husband could be. The fact that Steven forwarded me the email showed real concern and refused to leak it on stream for content left me feeling forever in his debt. The email read, "Hello Destiny, big fan. There is a word getting around here in Australia that Lauren's husband is officially divorcing her. I have a friend that is friends with his close friend, and apparently he is pretty open about that fact and just says she's a grifter that sleeps around when she travels. They have been separated for over a year, and Lauren is just embarrassed and worries about the optics of it being a conservative and Christian and all. Would love for you to ask her on a live debate about divorce and her views. Then be like, aren't you about to be divorced? Your husband thinks you're a horrible grifter, Kevin." Oh my god, dude. He wants to destroy her, dude. The fuck? I know it sounds like a bad parody, but I regret to report that it's real. I could tell it was Mitch by the way he typed. He has sent countless emails like this, each one tweaking the details slightly, all with the same goal, to provoke and humiliate me. Some were just stupid and bizarre, but others cut deeper. Accusations that I had stolen our son and kept him from being part of his life. The truth couldn't have been further from the lies, and while I tried not to engage, it was hard not to feel the weight of it hanging in the background, waiting to be weaponized. No matter how politically different the people he emailed were, he always pretended to be a fan of their work, hoping to bait them into a response. He quickly realized that red pill, anti-feminist content got the most traction, so he leaned into that. The irony wasn't lost on me. These were the same men who built entire platforms on dissecting human manipulation and power dynamics, yet they were the first to fall for his act. Huh? These were the same men who built entire platforms on dissecting human manipulation, yet they were the first to fall for his act. Oh, I get it. Okay, yeah, that's kind of ironic. My own red pill adjacent past was haunting me again, this time in the form of a group too smug to realize they were being used. Years later, I discovered Mitch had also contacted reporters from the various mainstream outlets, trying to get them to publish a story about my sexual assault. He knew full well I never wanted it to be made public, especially not his twisted version of events. His goal was to psychologically break me, and he knew exactly how. During his time as a federal agent working gang cases, he had described the tactic. If they couldn't catch someone for real crime, they would drown them in drama and lawsuits, spreading lies, sowing paranoia. If they couldn't catch someone for real crime, they would drown them in drama and lawsuits, spreading lies, sowing paranoia, filing claims they knew wouldn't hold up, but would bleed someone dry financially and emotionally. It was a slow, deliberate method designed to push people to the edge.
Though he nearly pushed me there, it wasn't the way he'd hoped. I stopped calling, then came the flood of calls from his end. At one point, he sent me a photo of the late-night dinner we used to go to, offering to take me there again if I visited. He framed it as something tender, a shared memory we could return to, as if all the damage could be undone with greasy food and nostalgia. But I knew exactly what that invitation was, a lure back into the cage, a way to reset the cycle. No thank you. By this point, my heartbreak had evolved into a raw, animalistic need for survival. I couldn't understand why he hated me so much, why he wanted to hurt me, when I was the only one caring for our child. What good did it do our son for Mitch to torment me, to sabotage my ability to work, all while contributing nothing in child support? My mind spiraled, trying and failing to make any sense of any of it. I was able to confirm the Kevin email was from him trying to log into the account myself. When the two-factor authentication prompt came up, it showed the phone number where the code would be sent, partially hidden but with the first two and last two digits visible. They matched Mitch's exactly. Oh, that's smart. Wait, but don't you have to know the password? Okay. They matched Mitch's exactly. Eventually there was also a text admission. I took this to court, along with a stack of other emails I had been sending to my colleagues and family. The entire process was humiliating. I had to explain to the court everything that had been happening, piece by piece, lie by lie. Even more embarrassing were the conversations with my lawyer. She had to sit through dozens of hours of podcasts calling me a cheating whore who kidnapped my own child, accusing me of one-night stands with podcasters I hadn't so much as hugged. I had to explain that the alleged second pregnancy abortion was actually a Reddit meme, which my husband had later insisted was real to anyone who would listen. At times, even when recounting something true, he laced it with enough humiliating fiction to make it unrecognizable. And these were just the recent issues. They didn't even touch the pile of documentation on the abuse that had occurred before the separation. Divorce court is ugly. Abuse that had occurred before the separation, huh? The fuck? Okay. Divorce court is ugly. Divorce court slowly leaking onto the internet is even uglier. My lawyer and I were prepared for court, but after spending so long just fighting to affirm my own reality, I had no idea what to expect. I almost didn't believe it when the judge granted the protective order as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. I don't think I really fathomed how destructive my relationship had been until the law affirmed the truth I'd known deep down the whole time. Of course, in classic fashion, my ex-husband later leaked the protective order online anyway, despite it being illegal, and despite it containing information about where my child and I were living. At a certain point, the behavior stopped being shocking. It just became incomprehensible. I had gotten married and hoped it would protect me from the destructive world of me I wanted to escape. And now, not only was I back in it, but I had something new to run from, the very thing I thought would keep me safe. And even the court orders weren't keeping him at bay. In the background of this entire storm, there was Steven. Laughing at the absurdity of the situation, always with a story to one-up me, his reactions made me feel normal for once. I didn't think anyone in the world could possibly relate to the horrific mess I'd found myself in, yet there he was. Over time, our rivalry gave way to something quieter, an unspoken understanding that only two people broken by the same machine could share. Our conversations deepened, drifting beyond debates into the stories behind the personas, the strange twists that brought us here, and the uncanny parallels in our upbringings. We weren't supposed to connect. The imaginary boxes of left, right, ally, and enemy were designed to keep people like us apart. Our conversations felt like we were crossing lines we weren't meant to, and it left me questioning the categories I once used to use so easily to define people. Of course, these were the kind of talks that could never happen publicly. The idea of showing genuine sympathy, or God forbid, understanding for a political enemy just didn't fly. We joked about it. Imagine if we livestreamed this right now, cackling on the other end of the phone. Hard no. I don't think I fully conveyed just how deeply our audiences despise one another. It wasn't just a disagreement, it was open warfare. To them, we might as well have been Putin and Zelensky, grabbing drinks in secret. Of course, there was no real war between us. We were talking about ideas, after all. And in my experience, no ideological difference had ever stopped me from caring for someone. What did stop me, what kept real connection at arm's length, was the internet's projection of who I was and who they were. The way identities got flattened, twisted, turned into caricatures, that's what made everything toxic. Though if I'm being honest, this wasn't just about mutual respect across political lines. I was becoming increasingly interested in Steven's left-wing politics. I like to say it was in a calm academic way, but really I was getting desperate to unscramble my brain. When your own beliefs have helped blow up your life, you start grasping for anything that might explain why. I hadn't applied right-wing ideology perfectly, far from it, but neither had anyone around me. All I could see anymore was the theater of it all, a system that rewarded performance over principle. So I started to wonder, maybe Stephen and his seemingly ridiculous progressive ideology actually had a piece of the puzzle I was missing. Maybe what I needed was more information, more experience I shut out to find clarity. Or maybe I just wanted relief from the guilt, a new ready-made ideology to help me make sense of things. It was a clever distraction from slowing down and looking inward, one that felt productive. Stephen, all too happy to join in on my quarter-life crisis. After our first Virginia adventure, we were scheduled to debate at a live event in Texas. We planned to hang out a bit afterward, go shooting and catch up. Then Stephen casually mentioned he might know someone who could get us MDMA. The idea cracked me up. Imagining locking all the usual political cartoons in a room, making them do drugs together. No more masks, no more posturing. Trump and Kamala Harris debating after a few bong hits. Ben Shapiro and Brianna Joy Gray on meth. Could he even talk any faster? Incredible. Unhinged, but incredible. I couldn't orchestrate that kind of chaos on a national level, but I could make a tiny version of it real. It wasn't something I was particularly experienced with. However, if you're familiar, you know that the drug acts almost like a truth serum. You end up physically immobilized, lying on the floor or a couch, staring at the ceiling and saying things you wouldn't even admit to your closest friends. My first debate with Stephen had been so heated, so filled with mutual disdain that we didn't speak for years afterward. So to suddenly be in that state, with unfiltered access to the mind of a political rival, was wild. I remember sitting on the couch insisting, I don't think it's working, as I swallowed another half tablet, and about 10 minutes later, my eyes turned into black holes and I began dissolving into the cushions. Staring into the abyss of reality and vomiting up all the questions I never had the confidence to confront while sober. It wouldn't really make sense to try to recount those conversations here, partly because the nature of MDMA makes everything feel profound, and partly because trying to translate the exact thoughts from that state onto the page would just sound, well, stupid. But if I had to describe the general feeling, it was this. We have more in common than we think, which to be fair is probably what MDMA is designed to make you believe. The drug will have you saying, I love you, to traffic cone and genuinely believing you have become one. Looking back, I'm more convinced than ever that the gap between progressive and conservatives is smaller than it seems. The motivations often overlap. It's the interpretations and solutions that differ. Many progressives, for example, still hold a quiet fondness for traditional ideals like family and stability. The difference is they question whether those ideals are realistic or healthy, shaped by the belief that clinging to them can create false identities and do more harm than good. After all, plenty of children grew up in broken homes even when the nuclear family was publicly championed. This may not have been Stephen's exact view, but I think experiences like his led to some see conservative ideals not as aspirational but as hollow, not based on reality. I'm reminded of environmental writer Derek Jensen. In A Language Older Than Words, he writes about growing up in a conservative home where he was horrifically sexually abused by his father. Though critical of traditionalism, he was later cancelled by the left for rejecting their boundaryless approach to sexuality, an approach he argued, rightly in my view, can be just as damaging as the silence and repression found in conservative culture. To me, the truth lies somewhere in between. I digress, back to the MDMA sesh. Once you've heard someone's real story, it's hard not to understand their choices, no matter where they land politically or how much they hurt you or others. I remember lying on that couch, tears rolling off my cheeks into the cushion below. I was listening, really listening to what Stephen was saying, maybe for the first time, and him to me. It was the opposite of everything we did on YouTube, a genuine desire to understand and a genuine feeling of being understood. In that state, your empathy for everyone becomes overwhelming. You wonder how you could have been so judgmental, so cruel to others, so cruel to yourself. Of course, those realizations fade fast once the desperation for the high kicks back in. Suddenly, it's 3 a.m. and you're swaying into the carpet, still in the same clothes you threw on that morning, shaking while sipping lukewarm water from a plastic cup to fight the dry mouth. You're on your hands and knees, digging through a crumpled bag, praying there's half a pill left. There is, thank God, just enough to stretch the night a little longer. Then the sun starts bleeding through the blinds, and all that's left is the come down, the hum of the hotel fridge, the pacing, the paranoia. You're standing in an old hotel room with the left-wing streamer you fight with online, high out of your mind, having just confessed your deepest, darkest secrets. What the hell is going on? Damn, this is how people become crackheads, isn't it? I get it now. And yeah, something shifted. I seen a side of Stephen now that I didn't think people like him even had. The warmth lingered and was impossible to unsee. Not that it changed my trajectory. Seeking enlightenment, that was a generous rebrand. I wasn't trying to heal. I basically given up on that. I was in the psychological kamikaze phase of life. Steven, there for the mission, but I was definitely the one flying the plane. We both had our reasons. In the rough start competition, I think Steven won. That said, I was still reeling from the chaos of my marriage, and then there was the whole Andrew Tate fiasco. His manufactured fame was just starting to really take off. It's not like was having a panic attack every time an Instagram reel popped up. I'm pretty even-tempered, but I was incredibly irritated at how unavoidable he became. His face on every screen, his name in everyone's mouth. I couldn't even grab a coffee without seeing him splashed across a newspaper. To make matters worse, my friends and colleagues were cheering on his every move without an ounce of critical thinking. Steven had his baggage, and I had mine. At that point, Romania was right up there with my failed marriage. Topics I'd rather set myself on fire than discuss. Steven saw through the idiocracy of it all without a second thought. He undoubtedly became one of my closest friends. Drugs play a big part in breaking down walls, but I also think I had every motivation to care for someone whose life was utterly dissected and torn apart by the internet. Accepting him as he was felt like extending grace to the part of myself I spent years trying to outrun. The part of me that was a spectacle, a public humiliation ritual. I finally had someone beside me at the gallows, winking in my direction as we traded grins. Our own little secret, we no longer gave a fuck. It was us against the world, quite literally. The left loathed me, the right loathed him, perfect balance. Neither of us went into our conversation seeking a relationship, which freed us from performance or pretense. There was no pressure to hold on too tightly or mold each other into something else. I wasn't looking to discover love, at least not the kind I believed in before I was divorced. I wasn't capable of it. I made vows in my marriage, and I meant them. The idea of remarriage felt impossible, not just emotionally, but existentially. Either marriage was still sacred, and I was bound to someone who abandoned me, or the whole thing that had been a lie. I was increasingly leaning toward the latter. Steven and I talked about that a lot. He encouraged me to picture a future with hope, with family. You'll find the right guy one day, he said. I smiled but laughed silently to myself. Couldn't he see that belief was already dead? I was just burning through the last bit of escape I had left, riding shotgun in a rented Mustang, smoking a joint, blaring Ventura Highway as we tore down the California coastline. It was fun, racing away from your problems, usually is. I figured if anyone could debate me out of my nihilistic death spiral, it was him. Not by defending the beliefs that had unraveled me, but in spite of them. Ironically, those conversations didn't push me into progressive politics. They just helped me realize I wasn't at war with God, I was at war with a broken framework I mistaken for faith. One to tangle up in a marriage that barely functioned. I believe my shame was spiritual, but it was really just political, cultural, inherited, which is why Steven could debate me out of it. Truthfully, whatever Steven and I had, trauma bond, chemical haze, or something deeper forged in the wreckage. It was never a relationship in the conventional sense, and that was probably for the best. Still, there was something real under all the mess. I want to hedge, to obscure it somehow, but I'd be lying if I said there wasn't love there, even if it looked strange. We spent hours arguing over ski scores at the range of philosophy in an arcade, just trying to outdo each other like kids. Somehow for both of us, competition was its own kind of intimacy. It was rare to meet anyone else who felt the same. I used to joke that he should buy a farm and settle down, the trad way. He laughed and said he was quite confident he preferred his progressive, commitment-free... Okay, I'm gonna pause right here because at this point we're just reading Lauren talk back and forth, over and over and over again. About, oh, I will say this, and then he will say that, I will say this, he will say that. We're basically reading Lauren flirting with him at this point. Except she doesn't want to admit it. So, but she says it over and over and over again. Oh, he would joke this, I would joke that, he would joke that. Alright, anyways, I'm just saying, bro. He laughed and said he was quite confident he preferred his progressive, commitment-free lifestyle. Eventually, our incompatibility, even just as friends, became something we couldn't just laugh off anymore. We hit the limit of how far denial and ideological banter could carry us. Even the drugs couldn't paper over how differently we saw the world or what we needed from it. It wasn't bitter, just overdue. So no, we didn't ride off into the sunset as the internet's most deranged and widely loathed political power couple. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't trying to blow up my life or pretend it was fine. I started to believe maybe there was something in between, something steadier. I spent years swinging between extremes, clinging to old ideals or torching them without building anything in their place. But now, maybe I didn't need to live at either edge. Maybe life after divorce didn't mean doom or delusion, just something new. As for what happened between us and the fallout that followed, I won't pretend it was clean. When we realized it was time to say goodbye, Steven got so drunk I think he forgot we were in real life and not mid-Twitch debate. He lifted his credit card in the air, swaying like a ship in a storm, and loudly declared, "Aren't you upset aren't you upset there are so many black people here, Lauren?" Unfortunately, we were not online making stupid e-jokes about my right-wing reputation. We were in a very real, very ethnic arcade bar, and he was saying it loud enough for the entire place to hear. Then, for reasons known only to the universe and maybe vodka, he flung his credit card across the room like it was a ninja star. I scrambled after it, fully aware that every head had turned to me, each person silently asking themselves if they just heard what they thought they heard. I ran back, forced a smile at the crowd, then hoisted Steven's arms over my shoulders as he launched into a slurred debate. Still mid-argument, all the way out the door. He puked. We argued as always. We laughed, and maybe because we both knew it was the end, we let ourselves get a little teary-eyed. The whole thing was weirdly unforgettable and completely disastrous, but that wasn't the real mess. Today, it's extraordinarily obvious to me that non-monogamous relationship dynamics almost always lead to hurt, because they deny something fundamental about who we are as human beings. But after my marriage ended, I didn't really know down from up. I figured perhaps the non-monogamous crew had gotten something right. Considering half the married people I knew were basically polyamorous, they just forgot to tell their spouses. Regardless, so they were cheating on each other. Regardless, there were blurred lines and people got hurt. I regret that deeply. At the time, I generally thought things were okay, but I was wrong. It was a painful, confusing situation. Maybe if I believed I had a future, I would have asked harder questions. That my life is over mindset can feel harmless, melodramatic maybe, but if left unchecked, it becomes its own kind of permission slip to act without discernment. Some people dismiss the Christian idea of self-forgiveness as a cop-out, and don't get me wrong, I do believe it's been weaponized by influencers trying to dodge real accountability. But outside of clickbait redemption arcs, truly believing you're forgiven, letting go of shame is one of the few tools that leads to real change. It's hard to stop hurting other people until you stop hating yourself. I don't buy into the internet's obsession with calling people unlovable or irredeemable. Broken people are still people, even the messy, even the mean. I like to think that with a little sunlight and some work, most of us have gone something worth loving. It's when I believe otherwise that I've made the most reckless decision in the name of love. Oops is chapter 21. Okay. Is she saying that that's how she ended up having sex with Destiny then? Oh boy. Okay, interesting I guess. But yeah, alright, cool. Alright, so chapter 21 is called Oops. Over the years, countless kids, younger siblings of friends, and even random teenagers in my DMs have asked me the same thing. How do you succeed on YouTube? According to a 2019 Harris poll, nearly 30% of kids aged 8 to 12 list a YouTuber as their top career choice. I get it, but I wish there were a scared straight for internet fame. Just a glimpse of what happens when your mind starts slipping under the weight of it. Fame isn't what it seems doesn't scare anyone. My story probably won't either, but I can tell you this, I'm not the first and it won't be the last to slowly unravel under E-Fame's spotlight. I have more than a few colleagues who can back that up with mugshots. Speaking of my sanity, I wish I could say I'm completely above caring what people think now. I'm not. Even now I catch myself hoping people will understand why I made the choices I made. Maybe if they knew my mindset, they wouldn't think I'm so bad. But the truth is, the worst things I've done never went viral. When I read this section to a friend, he joked, "What are you saying? You killed 100 refugees instead of the dozen the internet accuses you of?" I laughed. Of course not. It's just the real internet's internal struggles, the ones that actually shape you, don't trend. I'm getting better though, or at least trying. These days, I'm committed to telling the truth, to myself first and then to others. It's funny how growth doesn't make you feel more noble, just more disturbed by your own reflection. Still, I've started seeing shame not as torment, but as a compass. Not a tool for cruelty, but a quiet reminder of where not to step again. Each chapter I write pulls an old mistake into the light, not to glorify it, nor to beg for absolution, just to fold it into the story of someone trying to do better. But truth-telling doesn't mean flinging yourself open for anyone who asks. It's not about confessing every wrong to people who are only here to gawk or at or hurt you. Listen, if I had to get into the details of every stupid thing I've ever done in my life, this book would be longer than Crime and Punishment. What I've chosen to share reflects where I was spiritually, not a full inventory of my sins. If you're here looking for a clean verdict, good or bad, you're asking the wrong question. Though there is one more little secret I should tell that won't win me any awards. I spent the last 3 years convinced I had violated sanctioned laws and was about to be charged for it. Oops. It's been holding my brain hostage ever since. Okay, what's a sanction law? Gotta Google this real quick. Sanction law. Okay. Nah, whatever. Honestly, in every meet I had with Jason, the CSIS agent, I wasn't sure if he knew about it or not. I initially assumed he did, and they truly had something on me, but the more he talked, the less certain I was. His behavior didn't exactly scream, "We got her." Thankfully, after Trump won the election, I decided to fire my lawyers and tell CSIS to get stuffed. I couldn't afford them anymore anyway, and CSIS couldn't even offer immunity since they don't actually lay charges. I figured if they were going to ruin my life, I might as well go out swinging. Turns out that was one of the best decisions I ever made, because when I stopped playing defense, I finally figured it out. I hadn't done anything wrong at all. Here's what happened. Before the war in Ukraine, in late 2021, I did a mini documentary with Russia Today, cued accusations of me being a Russian agent from the usual midwit crowd. But let's be clear. Before the invasion, working with RT wasn't even remotely unusual. Michael Moore gave them interviews. Larry fucking King had a show at RT until just a year before the war. I know that's hard for some hindsight-driven brains to process, but that's the reality. I didn't take a job with RT. At the time, I was newly abandoned by my husband and searching for work when they approached me. Not with a job offer, but a proposal to license one of my films. I had full creative control and got to choose the project my own company would produce. It was a great deal, honestly, more creative freedom than any mainstream Western outlet would have given. They paid half up front before I started filming, with the remaining balance due upon delivery. I decided to focus the film on immigration from Mexico to the United States, following caravans of migrants from Guatemala all the way to the Texan border. I hired all the staff, videographer, translator, security, and booked everything myself. Honestly, it was mostly a film sympathetic to the plight of migrants. A critique of how loose border policy benefits no one. I know people imagine RT has an unwavering agenda to sow division, and maybe that's true. To be honest, they seem a little annoyed that my film didn't lean harder into hyperbole, but the deal stayed in place. I had final say, and I wasn't there to make partisan hackery from the start. If you're curious, the film's called American Mirage, if it's even still online anywhere. The editing process took longer than expected. We wanted the film to actually be good. A real look at the border crisis without parroting left or right talking points. I had a similar deal with my editor. Part up front, the rest upon submission. But just about a month before we finished, Russia invaded Ukraine. I had multiple calls with the team at RT beforehand asking if there was any funny business going on at the border. Each time I was assured that it was just media nonsense hyping things up. Now you can call this gaslighting, but I'm not entirely sure what that's what it was. When the invasion actually happened, I called one of my contacts at RT. He seemed genuinely blindsided, devastated even. It's fascinating how here in Canada and America, we went full World War II era racism the moment the invasion happened. I saw Russian bathhouses taking their signs down, people removing Moscow Mule from their drink menus, as if it were specifically Russians who made this decision as a monolith, as if the city of Moscow itself had orchestrated the war. In reality, many Russians didn't want this conflict. More than 20,000 people have been detained for anti-war demonstrations as of just November 2023. That said, my real frustration isn't directed at people living through the war. Those who fled or lost everything deserved a wide berth for their anger, even if it sometimes comes out ugly. I can't imagine anything more arrogant than tone policing rage from the comfort of my Canadian home. My frustration is for Westerners who treat foreign conflicts like fashion trends, something to posture about online for a few months before moving on to the next cause. Obviously, after the invasion, I told the RT team I would not be selling them any more projects. It had been a short-lived deal anyway, but I still had to finish the one film we agreed on. Otherwise, I couldn't pay my videographer editor who had worked tirelessly and needed to support his family. At the time, I was barely covering bills, and I'd already sunk a lot of my own money into the project. Could I have survived without the final payment? Maybe, but it would have been ugly. I delivered the movie, the contract ended, and honestly,
I didn't care what they did with it, as long as they didn't change the film. They ended up posting it on some random clickbait page run by a Malaysian influencer that barely got any views, so the movie flopped. A shame, really. They still paid me. One second, let me just wipe my eyes a bit. Oh. Damn, I just woke up and oh, okay. They still paid me, but it took a while. The money came routed through a bunch of different countries. At the time, I didn't know exactly when sanctions kicked in or who they covered, but once the Tenet debacle exploded, you can bet I went scrambling. Only a few months ago, I was rushing to my office, pulling old bank records, cross-referencing dates, even thinking about going to a public library so my Google searches wouldn't get traced. They paid me just weeks after the sanctions were imposed. Fuck. Okay. I looked at the documents and laughed. Then I bought a pack of cigarettes and smoked them on the edge of a cliff. I was cooked. I wasn't a Russian agent. I hadn't worked with RT to break laws or push propaganda. If anything, it was the opposite. I was never told about any alleged Russian backing of Tenet, but at this point, any claim of innocence was going to look like absolute bullshit. And I wasn't convinced the government would care much about my intentions anyway, especially when the whole Canadian government investigation seemed completely political. The House of Commons hearings on Tenet were enough to drive anyone insane. They were getting everything wrong, didn't seem to care. They exaggerated Tenet's numbers by the millions and treated basic fact-based criticisms of immigration policy like they were Russian disinformation campaigns. I was beyond cooked. I was the only Tenet employee in Canada, and they needed a scapegoat. They were spending at least hundreds of thousands of dollars hunting for one. Or maybe not. Maybe they didn't actually know. I knew none of my friends or colleagues really knew the details of my RT debacle. The only person who did was overseas and definitely wouldn't talk to the feds. So when Jason and I were going for a friendly stroll on the beach and told me my friends were ratting on me, I genuinely had to rack my brain to figure out what the hell he was talking about. Okay, I'm just trying to think a bit. She seems to be really paranoid that now, she thinks that even though she's innocent, these, government agencies are coming after her and they're, dead set on just, ruining her, huh? What could possibly be the problem? Maybe he doesn't know after all. Surely he'd be making more threats alluding to my bank records if he did. But then he gave me a name, and my world nearly collapsed. Not just because of the implied threats, but because of the weight the name carried. Earlier that year, an old friend of mine had almost died from an overdose. I had spent months trying to help them recover. Clean, sober, hopeful. And for a while, there really was a healing happening. I'm not saying I handled it perfectly, I didn't. But I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. And if you've ever dealt with addiction yourself or watched someone you care about spiral, you know how fast it can all fall apart. The frantic hospital calls, the lies, the baggies flushed down the toilet, the late night drives, terrified you'd find a body. Eventually, I had to say goodbye. The chaos started spilling into my life, pulling me under. It wasn't the first time. I care about this person like a sibling, but I should have said a goodbye a long time ago. I just have a hard time letting go of people. And now Jason was telling me the feds were using that same friend to gather information on me. My heart cracked open, but I didn't let him see it. I laughed and shot back a quip about being careful with sources he used. I knew the kind of paranoia government agents could stir in people. They were doing it to me now. Jason seemed desperate to let me know they were going to find something on me eventually, anything, using whoever they needed to. I sat for hours that week just rubbing my temples, trying to brace myself, wondering what kind of psychological or emotional torment was coming next. After firing my lawyers and starting to prep for my testimony, I finally did what I probably should have done a long time ago. I started digging into sanctions law myself. I asked my lawyers about it before, but they hadn't given me much clarity. Quite frankly, it's embarrassing how quickly a cursory read of Canada's sanctions page changed my life. Alright, bro, if you're hiring someone and they talk to you that is so confusing, I would basically fire them, because I think everything can be explained so simply, or everything can be simplified down. If they can't simplify it down, they're being dodgy. I don't believe it. I think it's bullcrap. I genuinely feel like almost everything can be simplified down to something simple and clear to someone. Maybe for some people, they have this, they're not good at communicating, so they just say whatever's on their mind, and it comes out weird and all, and not understandable. But if you just think from the standpoint of empathy, you think for how other people would take what you're saying, right? Then you purposefully simplify it down to a level that they can understand. That's still relatively accurate. All right, that's just my take. Anyways,
All right, looking at so Lauren's just reading sanctions page from Canada. Exceptions to the asset freeze and dealings prohibition on designated persons listed in Schedule 1 are available for the following. Payments made by or on behalf of designated persons pursuant to contracts entered into prior to the coming into force of the regulations, provided that the payments are not made to or for the benefit of a designated person. I've done nothing illegal, yet I've been sweating over it for 3 years? Incredible. I suppose sometimes our laws do make sense, or I could be totally misinterpreting things and get arrested after publishing this. That would be very funny. Double oops. Either way, my fears about CSIS and the House of Commons later this month, November 2024, are rapidly dissipating. I'll be just fine, honestly. Without this hanging over my head, there are a few things I feel like mentioning to our government, particularly after my deep dive into CSIS intimidation tactics. For all my disdain for the internet these days, the information available on psychological operations targeting civilians has been surprisingly helpful. On some levels, I always knew, but it was validating to see the exact statements that had been made to me listed as intimidation tactics. Methods used to destabilize someone's thinking, the threats about potentially not being around to see my child's life or support him, the flirting, the compliments, the veiled job offers, the threats of friends ratting, the promises of protection. He does mess with my head a bit. They're good at it, but we're back, baby. Jason's acting like an ex-boyfriend now. He sent me a text about how he respects me, but thinks we still need to talk one last time. He keeps calling. Sorry, bud. Straight to the voicemail. If you ever read this, Jason, sorry you'll have to come up with a new code name. For what it's worth, you were good at your job. I just hope in the future they keep your assignments to actual criminals, or at least someone more dangerous than a single mother making silly YouTube videos. Speaking of that, I suppose it's time to finally talk about how this whole Tenet Media thing really started. Alright, that's chapter 22, Down the Rabbit Hole. Alright, chapter 22 is called Down the Rabbit Hole. I accepted the job at Tenet in 2023 mostly because I needed a break from the pressure of running my own business. The salary helped too. I told myself it would be a fresh start. A chance to rebuild after the chaos of my marriage, the expensive legal battles, and the spirals. It had been about a year since the worst of it, the calls with my political rival for comfort, the sleepless nights fueled by Xanax and dread. Though the months leading up to the Tenet offer were hardly a walk in the park either. I wasn't healthy yet. I wasn't making good decisions. I was making survival decisions. There's a difference, and it's not a place a mother should be. On the surface, I still showed up to family events, raised my son, and kept working. Underneath, I was barely holding on. When the cracks finally showed, they hit hard. I remember lying in bed, thinking about the life I had lost and the one I no longer understood. My heart raced. The memories came rushing in uncontrollably. The chaos, beauty, heartbreak, fear, every scene that felt like it belonged in a movie. I wasn't even sure what I believed anymore. It was like watching my mind shatter into a million pieces in real time. I finally understood that phrase. My life flashed before my eyes. No matter what I did, my heartbeat wouldn't slow. I was sure I was dying. I called an ambulance and scrolled through pictures of my son, who was staying with my parents that night. I thought of all the things I wanted for his life and how desperately I wanted to be there to see them. I made a bargain with God that everyone makes when they think they're about to go. Let me live and I'll get my life together. Eventually my heart slowed down. I sheepishly called the paramedics to apologize. They told me not to worry. It was pretty common for someone having their first panic attack. I went to the ground to open up and swallow me whole. A panic attack? Seriously? I could hardly believe it. I spent years mocking people for less, drunk on bootstrap conservatism and an inflated sense of invincibility. And there I was, hyperventilating on the floor, being personally owned by my own nervous system. If nothing else, the experience ripped one last pillar out from under me. Mental health was real. And I was not in any sense okay. It took a while to admit it, even to myself. I wasn't ready to ask for help, but the illusion that I could just tough it out was gone. I didn't overhaul my life overnight. I stopped smoking weed for a while, and when I came back to it, it was never the same crutch. I spent more time outside, trying to live in the real world instead of surviving in my head. Still, small changes could only get me so far. As long as I was shackled to old secrets, I wasn't really free, and pretending I was someone I wasn't was eating me alive. Around this time, right before Tenet, around my first panic attack, I decided to tell the internet the truth about my failed marriage. I couldn't live like this anymore, constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for my ex-husband's threats to expose me to land. I needed my life back. I needed to close the gap between who I was and who the world thought I was. If I was going to survive in public media, I had to raise at least one major lie. I've spoken before about how terrified I was of the social shame that came with being a single mother, especially in the traditionalist circles I once helped build. That fear was still real, but something had changed. I no longer saw those people as moral authorities.
I saw them for what they were, comfortable critics, wagging their fingers at struggling parents who, in most cases, never planned for life to turn out this way. It's always easy to shame people when they are staying in a marriage held together by luck, inertia, or more likely, the silent agreement to never talk about your actual problems. Although in many cases, these people aren't even married at all. Seeing it for what it was made it easier. Their judgment wasn't something to fear anymore, it was something to laugh at. I sat on my computer with the post ready, heart pounding. Then I sighed, hit send, and braced for impact. What I didn't expect was the overwhelming relief. Telling the truth was chaotic. Sure, there was drama, backlash, everything I feared, but what surprised me was the wave of kindness that followed. People weren't just ready for honesty, they were starving for it. Even some from my old world reached out, quietly admitting they saw things differently now too. Let me pause the recording real quick. Alright. Thousands of messages came in, mostly from women in similar situations, trapped in broken marriages, terrified of judgment, pretending to be fine. Some were shockingly high profile. A few asked for advice I wasn't qualified to give. I was still in the maelstrom of my own wreckage, just trying not to drown. I hadn't realized how many of us were living double lives, crushed under expectations we helped build. Why do we do this to ourselves? Why can't we just be honest? Maybe because honesty doesn't often trend, but for me, it worked like medicine. The panic attack started to fade, and slowly so did my obsession with the political world I used to think I could save. Alright, now let me pause real quick, alright? Because you know what something every single, influencer, whatever, always say, or at least, most of them? It's the phrase called be yourself, right? They all say, hey, be yourself. Everyone, you should just be yourself. I'm just gonna be myself. So now, in this case, you also at the same time see a lot of people, they're stuck actually, as Lauren said, in like a double life, right? The image of what they are and versus what other people saw in that, and now they're like pretending everything's okay when things are not really okay. In other words, I'm saying like to some extent they're not that. Oh, is there a cat here? There's a cat. That's cute. Right? So if you want to preach be yourself, then I feel like I find that some people who preach it are not so honest about it. Like they're a little hypocritical about it. Like they pretend everything's okay. They say, "Oh yes, you should be yourself. I be myself all the time," but then underneath they're also like they have this like whole other side to them that they're afraid to show because of all the reasons that Lauren just said. They're afraid of like social shame and all that. So what we get, honestly, like a lot of people when they're always happy all the time, I don't understand it at all. Like I feel like it doesn't feel real to me, but at the same time, it also feels like everyone around me feels happy all the time. So it's a little weird to me. I don't know. I'm just like saying stuff that I feel that I experience. All right. Anyways, I'm just gonna pause here for a bit and because it's a little late. I want to sleep right now. All right. That summer, I drifted back into the real world, or at least a version of it. I spent my days outside, camping, swimming, baking, even painting. I wasn't exactly healed in any meaningful sense yet, but I was moving in that direction. And honestly, some of the most beautiful and joyful days of my life happened during this time. Still, there was an air of the Lotus Eaters around it. Long afternoons on the beach with a spiff, pretending the world and my problems didn't exist, teaching to baby deer like I was some kind of Disney princess, paddleboarding through endless summer days with my son, then binge watching Los Sopranos while devouring wet trays of gluten-free brownies. I loved it. Of course, escapism has a price. I had to lose about 30 pounds from that little joyful detour. The real world hadn't disappeared. It was always there, waiting to catch up with me. By the end of that golden summer, I could feel reality circling back, quiet but insistent. I wasn't just carrying extra weight from all the brownies and weed. I was carrying the quiet, heavy sense that I still had unfinished business with the world I tried to leave behind. It was around then, in the summer of 2023, that I called a call from a startup media company. I wasn't interested at first, to be honest, but they said they'd shoot over an offer by email, so I figured I'd at least take a look. The offer was decent. Not life-changing, but enough. I still live in Canada, where housing eats up 60% of your salary on a good day. But on this paycheck, I could live. Alright, let me pause. 60% of your salary just for housing? Jeez. Alright. Alright. Maybe even save a little. It felt practical. Ironically, it felt like I was finally making an adult decision.
I had stuck up my nose at classic right-wing commentary for years, but I didn't exactly have the guts to publicly question the world beyond a few half-assed videos with titles like The Whole Truth, in which I discussed a few gripes with the space's dynamics. A video that probably should have been called A Little More of the Truth, but still more than you can handle. Funny enough, those brief flashes of honesty did better than anything else, nearly pulling my old numbers again, hovering above 500,000 views. The rest of my videos though, those had tanked. I struggled to get even 50,000 clicks on videos about why conservatives shouldn't bully Gen Z for being apathetic, or why maybe, just maybe, they should ask more questions about the current state of capitalism. I wasn't winning the clickbait war, but at least I did feel like I was making the world worse. It was like I had thrown my life into neutral. I sighed and thought some version of it, you can't do this forever. I was living paycheck to paycheck, clinging to a tattered, worn-out version of principles. Maybe it was time to make a decision that was actually good for me and my kid. And besides, the contract promised full creative control. I wasn't compromising, right? But when I looked more closely at the contract, the demands, the deadlines, I felt the old dread creeping back. 3 videos a week, plus 2 mini documentaries a month. Ranting off the cuff, churning out content faster than I could live. I knew it was becoming the industry standard. I also knew it was a standard that was killing us, spiritually and intellectually, by demanding the sacrifice of quality, thoughtfulness, and meaning. Bro, I feel the same way about so many damn, other things in work, dude. It's all like this. Like, it's been pushed to this state where you're basically, the only way to live is, you act like a robot. Hate that. Still, I figured I had to adapt. Everyone else was doing it, and somewhere deep down, I was afraid to be left behind. It wouldn't be the first time I sat in front of an editing screen, desperately cutting in colorful visuals and audio tracks to make some bottom-of-the-barrel rant about the wokey mind virus, at least tolerable to watch. The will to live draining from my eyes between every jump cut. This was what the industry had become. Predictable, repetitive. I could sum up any commentator's take just by reading their video title. I wasn't the girl who rocked the boat anymore, because there was no boat left to rock. Only the last job life raft I had built my world around. Fine. I could make some clickbait videos if I tried hard enough. Maybe I could make them meaningful or at least honest, but I was lying to myself. Another bargain made years later to stay in politics, and like every bargain I made, this was no exception. It blew up in my face. I signed the contract. We wouldn't start for a few months, but I flew out to California to do a quick photo shoot with their photographer. Then I got down to the drawing board and started coming up with mini documentary ideas I felt could be thoughtful. At first I was surprised by how little oversight there was. I just sit down with a hired videographer and talk about whatever problems I cared about that day. I started with a mini doc on the Canadian housing crisis, something literally everyone around me was furious about. A genuine deep dive into money laundering and shortages. It was okay, rough but okay. Slowly though, the videos began to wear me down. My attempts to make them meaningful devour hours I should not have spent filming and assisting with editing. I stayed up filming until 2 a.m. just to make quotas some nights. My hopes of creating thoughtful work drowned in a sea of late-night despair. I sit with my assistant, an angel truly, as we rejected hundreds of trending topics, each one more dull and painfully overdone than the last. She'd read out headlines. How about this one? I sink a little farther into my chair. Done it 3 years ago. She stayed cheerful, flipping to another story. Okay, here's another one. It's fake, I muttered. Made up for a fundraising scam. I read the court documents last week. Felt like trying to build a cathedral in a swamp. The more I pushed for thoughtful work in a world where no one even bothered to read past headlines, the more it felt like a deliberate act of self-torture. Why was I doing this? I suppose the one perk was that I finally had enough money to pay a therapist to help me sort out exactly that question. I sometimes wondered if she thought I was schizophrenic. I used a fake name, as usual, so she wouldn't Google me, though I'm sure she could figure it out if she really wanted to. She was kind, and we spent months unpacking my childhood, my early media years, the quiet accumulating madness of it all. It helped, honestly, it helped a lot. For the first time in a long time, someone outside my world looked at me and didn't see a political figure or a threat or brand. She just saw a person. When I spoke about my exhaustion, my disdain for politics, my desperate need to leave, she didn't flinch. She helped me unpack my options, calmly and logically, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Really, I just need someone to tell me I wasn't crazy while I unraveled everything I thought I knew. But even with therapy helping to steady me, the rest of the world wasn't. If anything, the more grounded I tried to become, the more unhinged everything around me seemed. The comment sections, the headlines, the invitations, the bots, it all started to feel off. Like reality had been replaced with something scripted, plastic, and full of hidden cameras. I began to spiral, not just emotionally, but intellectually. I started noticing strange patterns, repeated comment phrasing, new accounts flooding in, bizarre emails inviting me to international panels I hadn't applied for. I started putting the pieces together, even when they didn't always belong together. Some part of me knew I sounded insane, but another part, the deeper part, knew I wasn't imagining it.
Around the time I began working at Tenet, I received an invitation to join a group called the Valdale Society. Dear Mrs. Lawrence Souther, you're cordially invited to be a speaker at the 2024 Valdai Discussion Club that will be held between October 12 to 16, 2024 in beautiful Sochi, Russia, site of the 2014 Winter Olympic Games. This year's theme will be strengthening multilateralism for equitable global development and security. The theme on the opening day will be the 2024 American elections and their consequences to a changing multipolar world order. Some notable speakers on the opening day will include Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan. We are honored to have chosen you as an invitee to speak at this year's forum because of your views on immigration, notably your documentary film Borderless, and your position on how the migrant crisis had led to the breakdown of social order in Europe. If you choose to accept this offer, you and your guests will be provided with a 22-day all-expenses paid trip for 2 persons, including round-trip airfare. You will arrive in Moscow via Qatar Airways business class on October 10th at Sheremetyevo Airport, where you will meet your personal concierge for the duration of the trip. On the 11th, you will be on board the Krasnaya Strela Red Arrow luxury train, where you will be in the company of many notable figures attending the forum, which will all be staying at the Rodina Grand Hotel. On the 17th, you will return to Moscow on the train. You will have a 7-day stay in Moscow, where you will be staying at the Carlton Hotel. Your itinerary will include me, Alexander Dugin, author of several books including The Great Awakening versus The Great Reset, which you will probably find to be of tremendous interest, and I strongly suggest you read his book. If you have not done so already, you will also be a special guest on the famous Russian TV talk show Evening with Vladimir Solovyov. During your stay in Moscow, your personal concierge will introduce you to all the historical sites in Moscow, including a visit to the Kremlin and State Duma. You will then travel first class on Russia's only high-speed train Sapsan to St. Petersburg, where you will stay for 7 days, where you will have an all-access pass to all historical sites with your concierge. In St. Petersburg, you will be staying at the Four Seasons Lion Palace. This sort of thing isn't as bizarre as it may seem. As soon as the Israel-Palestine conflict flared up again, I received similar all-expenses-paid invitations to Israel from a few different outreach groups. However, Russia was far less expected, far less common. This makes sense considering the differing stances Western governments take on Russia and Israel. I initially assumed it was either a progressive outlet like Media Matters trying to gather intel on individuals who they thought supported Russia, or perhaps some government entity. I reached out to Rogan and to Carlson's team to confirm they weren't planning any trips to Russia. Both teams confirmed they weren't. Although Tucker ended up landing in Russia not long after this confirmation, what the hell was going on? It left me scratching my head. I called a few friends to get their opinions, and we agreed it would be fun to delve into who might be behind it. If it was a journalistic outlet wanting to expose me, I have to convince them I was truly going to attend the event, so they actually published their article. They requested I write a rough draft of my speech for review, so I did. However, I also included a coded message in the speech, making it clear that I knew the whole thing was a setup. I waited for months, anticipating it would be published or used against me, ready to expose the code and have a laugh. I was desperately curious to uncover who was behind it. It was never published anywhere. The group cut off contact. I'm not sure if they found the message I had hidden in the speech, and that's why they stopped responding. I still don't know who was behind it. I'm starting to think it was real. But incidents like this only deepen my growing fascination with the psychological warfare and manipulations happening behind the scenes of the media. It was becoming more than just an intellectual curiosity. It was becoming an obsession. I think a lot of people imagine foreign espionage or being asked as crossing some definitive Rubicon, one marked by clandestine agents, guns and briefcases, and envelopes stuffed with cash. Maybe even a mysterious hottie with an accent for good measure. In reality, it's just some English-speaking dweeb in a tweed suit nudging you to make TikTok videos about insert subject for cash at some inconspicuous pub after a political conference. Insisting it's all funded by a well-meaning private donor. It's not as dramatic or unidentifiable as people think, especially in the internet era. Around this time, my ex notifications were becoming increasingly insane, pushing me to adopt more radical political views than I actually held. I was bombarded with comments calling me a traitor or scum whenever I included nuance or reached out to different groups in my analysis of issues. The accounts behind these notifications were almost exclusively created in the last few months, each one following the same 10 to 20 other users. They typically had 0 followers or only followed each other, and if they posted tweets, they were usually only a dozen or so. These notifications flooded in by the thousands. Clearly someone was using bots to push me in a certain direction. I wasn't sure if I would make much of a difference, but I finally adjusted my settings to block notifications from accounts without verified email addresses or phone numbers, essentially accounts that were unlikely to be real people. The change was staggering. My notifications dropped by about 90%. I was horrified. How much of my opinions and mental state have been shaped not by real people but by corporations or governments purchasing bots to manipulate me, everyone else for that matter. I knew that using bots to push people into political rabbit holes was a real tactic. My ex-husband, who had worked in federal law enforcement, had discussed with me how individuals in his sphere openly admitted to using bot farms out of Eastern Europe to capture and entrap people in extremist ideologies. The manipulation comes from all directions. Let me pause real quick. If you use a bot farm to manipulate other people, you know what? It follows the same principle that Socrates said a while ago, right? He said he was accused of corrupting the youth, all right? And then his defense against why he wasn't corrupting the youth was that it was illogical for him to do it, because if you corrupt someone else, you're corrupting yourself at the same time. He said this as if it was like some stable truth. So I don't know if it actually is, all right? Maybe it isn't, but just by that principle, if you corrupt other people, you corrupt yourself. He thought that was illogical, right? So if you're using bots to manipulate other people, then I would say, wouldn't you at the same time be manipulating yourself in a way with your own bots? Like you're kind of like lying to yourself and like harming your own like mental state as well. Like you become like that too. Just saying. Alright, anyways. The Valdai group I emailed could have just as easily been a legitimate invitation for a pro-Russian agenda as it could have been a fake invitation for anti-Russian purposes. The bots flooding my notifications could be Russian bots, just as easily as they could be Western bots, corporate or NGO bots, or even a single person with deep pockets, trying to make me feel a certain way or hold a specific opinion. I have a photo on Instagram with nearly 30,000 comments, all saying the same thing, that I'm a transgender individual who believes in hate speech. It's nearly impossible to pinpoint who is behind these bots. The comments didn't make sense in the first place. The old internet was obviously gone. The people I knew were saying things that didn't make sense and didn't correlate with how people talk in real life. The issues coming up and being discussed on political talk shows were so inhuman. Alright, like that's what I'm saying, right? If you manipulate other people with their weird like bot speech, like when these people, the people behind these bots are probably just as like incapable of being social, and they talk like this weird bot way too. The way women and men were bitching about each other with such hate and disdain, such stereotypes. Unlike the content of the early internet and early 2000s that brought people together, everything today, even from the creators I like, seems to sow division. Even my own content had to be divisive to garner any traction. Okay, I'm gonna pause here actually because I need to. Alright. Outside the influencer class, even the comments sections were being manipulated. I saw a couple post a video of themselves watching the same Instagram reel on separate devices, then comparing their comment sections. The reel featured a woman venting about the modern dating scene. They were watching identical content, yet their comment sections told two completely different stories. On the women's screen, the responses were overwhelmingly supportive. You go girl, so true. On the man's, it was a torrent of hostility, insults calling her scum, accusing women of being too picky, predicting she'd die alone as a pathetic cat lady. Holy shit, dude. You know what? This might be my fucking Twitter as well. What the fuck? Comment sections are supposed to reflect the cultural pulse to guide how we respond to content. As social creatures, we look to the group to shape our feelings, but the algorithms have taken over. Even without foreign interference, these systems alone are warping our perceptions, rotting our minds and splitting us into alternate realities. Everything felt broken, and all I knew for certain was that there were people behind it and there was money behind it. The early 2000s internet was the Wild West, chaotic but full of opportunity. Like the land rush and Far and Away, anyone could take a claim. You didn't need fame or money, just the nerve to show up and put yourself out there. For a brief moment, it felt like the last true frontier. Then almost overnight, it changed. What once sparked chaotic creativity gave way to corporate sterility like a gentrified neighborhood. Stripped of its soul and the significance of the frontier in American history, Frederick Jackson Turner described how the frontier forged the American character. A place that bred antipathy to control, resistance to authority, and a hunger for self-determination. The frontier wasn't just geography, it was a mindset, but Turner also warned, so long as freeland exists, the opportunity for competency exists. But the democracy born of freeland, strong in selfishness and individualism, has its dangers. The East feared this unregulated expansion because it threatened their economic, political, and cultural order. A society built on autonomy was harder to centrally manage and impossible to fully own. That
same fear crept into the digital frontier, and just like before, the forces of control eventually came for the land, only this time it was virtual. As my ex-husband often said, we're no longer fighting over land, we're in a gray zone war for the mind. And just like the frontier, the internet's wild spirit was tamed before it could fully rewrite the rules. Not just by governments, but by anyone with power in the stake and psychological control, foreign, domestic, and corporate. I know of corporations quietly funding both right and left wing content to push legislations they need passed. It's not about politics, it's about owning your perception, selling it to you as ideology. In many cases, it's blatant. You're offered money and told to say something. Every country, including ours, is playing this game. While I mentioned Russian interference, I want to be clear. Russia is far from the only player. It's one of many in a crowded field of global influence operations, the one that exists and is so very real. As I delved deeper into my rabbit hole, sifting through various media connections, eventually I did work my way back to Russia. I sat on my computer clicking through old emails and names, anyone who was asking me to promote certain things. Of course, I got around to researching my guide, Frank. When I saw the results, I nearly choked. Frank, my guy, had been exposed as a Chinese spy in 2023. What the fuck? I forgot who Frank is too. Damn. Too many names. Frank Krayoman. Alright, so how a Chinese spy recruited a Belgian politician. For at least 3 years, Frank Krayoman, a far-right Belgian politician, was entrusted with missions given to him by a Chinese intelligence officer. Le Monde spent the final chance of obtaining their... Okay, so... What the fuck? That's so weird, bro. Chinese intelligence. Damn. If it's in Moscow. Okay. Okay. By Financial Times, okay. They accepted bribes from China's Ministry of State Security to influence discussions within the European Union. Okay. By putting up loopholes about okay, damn. Okay. Damn, okay. Okay, Jesus. Wow, alright. Of course, there had been something off about it, and I was extremely relieved I made the decisions I made all those years ago to avoid publication of any interviews I conducted that had been arranged by Krailman. I had already fallen down the rabbit hole of extreme skepticism toward any online media. Between the discovery of Frank's spy status, the algorithmic weirdness, and my X notifications entirely disappearing after adjusting my settings, I was being sent over the edge. I embarked on a wild journey trying to put together pieces of information, the connections, the payoffs, the bots. I questioned who was real and who wasn't. I saw my therapist's couch in hysterics, explaining how I felt the entire meosphere I was a part of had been shaped and manipulated by federal agents from various different nations. I told her that everything around me seemed like a lie. I cried, unsure whether I had completely lost touch with reality. I was becoming like that meme of Charlie from Always Sunny in Philadelphia, making the bulletin board of evidence connected together by a string to find Peep Sylvia. I tried to tell close friends and family, even going so far as to place our phones in the microwave for fear of being overheard. They thought I was having a mental breakdown. I don't blame them. I had no conclusive proof for the larger claims I was making. No one else had been sitting here reading my notifications for a decade, watching the slow, almost imperceptible shift in comment style repetition, account creation dates, or the political direction the posts were heading. It was just me, slowly losing my mind. I started to realize that even if I were publishing only my own views and opinions, the entire media apparatus was so tightly controlled that it didn't matter. The view counts, algorithms, and comment sections, they were all being manufactured by just about everything but real people. Foreign influence or not, if we didn't log off, we were doomed. Then I remembered there was one other person who had been watching the algorithms closely over the last decade, who had grown up on the internet like me. It had been years now since we'd seen each other, almost as long as we'd really talked, but maybe he could help. Alright, that's the end of chapter 22. Now it is chapter 23. Tesla and Najo. Steven, I'm in New York for a wedding. Can you meet me there? I couldn't believe I sent the text. I couldn't believe he replied. Yeah, sure, bud. He was colder than usual. I don't blame him. Last time we saw each other was 2 summers ago. Since then, we've gone from besties to nuclear-grade public meltdowns on both ends. Still, he agreed to meet. Apparently, he had a business there in the area that happened to line up, so it wasn't a big deal to book the flight. The wedding was for one of my normal YouTube friends, Sean Fitzgerald. Nice guy. One of the rare few who managed to keep his personal life intact. The venue was lovely, just outside the city, but I'd chosen to stay in Manhattan at a friend's place so we could catch up. Ashley St. Clair. What? Okay. She was still pregnant with Elon Musk and her baby at the time. But to me, she wasn't Elon's baby mama. She was just a girl who'd been through the same insane world of politics and heartbreak as me. No one even knew publicly yet. I dragged my bags up to her apartment, and the door flew open. Lauren, so glad to see you, she beamed, dressed in her usual goth chick, skull rings and all. She held me tight, then called out, just put that over there, Louis, to a man moving boxes into the apartment. She was still settling in. I dropped my bags in the guest room and immediately raided her fridge while she updated me on the political gossip I've been ignoring for months. Do you have a name for the baby yet? I asked, munching on some cheese I found. She stocked the fridge with all my favorite snacks before I arrived. Snacks are my love language, and honestly, I don't think anyone else had ever done that for me. A row of books on Rome lined her windowsill, just under a view of the Manhattan skyline. She dragged her finger across them. Romulus. We're thinking Romulus, she smiled to herself. I loved it. Alright, hold on a second. I just want to pause, because I need to... Alright. We stayed up late, laughing at how unserious the political world had become, and more importantly, how unserious our own lives had become. I told her I'd been seeing Steven briefly and joked that it'd be funny for the two of them to meet. Would love to, but I got Eva's wedding in Rome. E said he'd come. You never know with him, though. Come look at the dress I picked out. She meant Eva Vladimir-Borg, the European right-wing commentator who blown up online in recent years. I've been invited to, but I had committed to Sean's wedding first. Ashley's closet looks like something straight out of Gossip Girl. It spanned the entire wall, lined with shelves of designer purses and racks of high-end outfits, all meticulously arranged by color and length. Dresses were flying onto the bed as she pulled out option after option, handing a few to me with a grin. Try these on. I still hadn't recovered from my questionable teen fashion phase, so I was thrilled to have help. On the road in my early years, it was Colin and George buying Zara outfits for shoots. Now it was Ashley, tossing dresses in her Manhattan skyrise. The elegant lilac dress she picked for me looked perfect for the reception. Hers for Rome, even better. Honestly, Lauren, Mikasa, Sukasa, treat it like home. You and Steven can even have the Tesla tequila. Just use the open case. She had 2 Tesla and Noja tequila bottles shaped like thunderbolts sitting on the counter, surrounded by political paraphernalia and eccentric gifts. Haha, we won't be coming back here, but thanks, Ashley. Okay, just saying. We played computer games, browsed online shopping sites I couldn't afford, and eventually watched the city light up as night fell. Red, white, and yellow from the cars over the bridge, the glow shimmering across the water. When we got ready for bed, I lay down beside her for a while as we talked. Don't you believe in real love, Ashley? Like healthy love? Is wondering if Elon will even show up to this wedding really what you want? She paused. Her voice softened a bit, solemn. We care about each other a lot. We're best friends, but I'm also not delusional, Lauren. I know what kind of guy he is. I just know what the world is like now, too. I tried the traditional thing with my child's father. It didn't end well. It's a cruel world. I looked over at her, brows furrowed with concern. I love being a mother. He wants more kids. I want more kids. We know the deal. She continued, better to have a good friend who's a complicated man that can take care of you than cruelty from someone who won't. I saw so much of myself in her, especially after my marriage ended. That coldness toward hope, not from shallowness, but from heartbreak so deep that believing again felt like a risk she couldn't survive. I think I'd rather be alone forever than not have real love, I said. Well, that's one option too, I guess, she chuckled. We dozed off. She had an early flight, and I had a meeting with an old friend, though I wasn't sure there was any friendship left. I guess we'd find out. As she left for Rome the next morning, I woke up groggy, hair a mess, still in my pajamas, and gave her a hug goodbye at the door.
As soon as she left, I tried to go back to sleep but gave up, dragging myself to the kitchen, laying out a long yawn while rummaging through her drawers for tea. I threw on a hippie sabotage mix through the Bluetooth speaker to accompany my breakfast routine, a handful of snacks and a sugar-free energy drink from the fridge. I told Steven to meet me at a mini golf place. We had always had fun doing childish competitive things. I figured it'd be a low-stakes setting to chat. Really, I just wanted his take on the state of the internet. Whether I was losing my mind, not that I planned to tell him everything I was thinking. I wasn't sure if I could trust him at this point. He probably felt the same way about me. So he helped break me out of ideological delusions before. Maybe he had a few more useful insights. Or at least he'd make me feel a little more sane. He'd been watching the algorithms implode for years too. When we finally met up, it was more awkward than I expected. The conversation was stiff. We grabbed drinks at the bar before starting the game. He showed up in sweatpants, classic, immediately opened his laptop, half ranting about the irritation of running a business while firing off emails. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him open his personal banking app. I nearly spit out my drink. Damn, I thought. Maybe I should have stuck with streaming. The thought passed fast, knowing well I didn't have it in me. The golf game wasn't as fun as our old ski shooting or arcade outings. Steven was friendly enough, but we both acted like there were guns pointed at our backs. Back to square one, I guess. Debate opponents again. I vaguely brought up my concerns about the new internet, but things weren't warm enough to go deeper into the spiral I'd been caught in. Oh well, I thought. He had dinner with colleagues that night and had the wedding tomorrow. We started goodbyes, and I took an Uber back to Ashley's place. The next day, he texted me, "Hey, my flight's super late early morning. I'll need to head to the airport in the middle of the night. Don't want to book another hotel. Can I just work at Ashley's place?" I wasn't sure how far Mikasa Sukasa extended, but part of me knew Ashley would be fine with it. She'd probably even laugh. Yeah, sure, just get here before 1 p.m. I've got to head out to the wedding then. Steven showed up about an hour before I had to leave and sat onto the couch tweeting away. The vibe was more relaxed this time. We bantered a bit, laughed while I curled my hair in the other room. For a moment it felt like old times, then out of nowhere he asked, "Do you think the election was stolen, like what Trump said?" I paused, caught off guard. I mean, not really, I don't think it had to be, I said carefully. When the media and big tech basically carry water for one side, why would they need to rig it? It's all narrative control now anyway. He went quiet, then stiffened. "You know Trump was the one who actually tried to steal it, right?" he demanded. "You've read about the fake elector scheme?" "Yeah, I've heard of it," I replied, still playing it neutral. I just never looked into it that deeply. He stared at me like I said I didn't believe in gravity. "What do you mean you haven't looked into it? But you'll spend hours digging into whatever sketchy thing Biden does. You'll care about Hunter's laptop and some random coke photos, but not a sitting president trying to overturn an election?" "Well, hold on. I've never cared that much about Hunter's laptop," I said. "I wasn't jumping up and down over that stuff." "Maybe not you," he said, "but your entire side does." It wasn't banter anymore. His voice had changed. He was genuinely frustrated. "Lauren," he said, standing up and starting to pace, "your side, your whole movement has lost it. Completely. I honestly don't know how we're supposed to even talk when we live in different realities. There's no coming back from this." I tried to diffuse it. We don't have to talk about politics. It doesn't always have to go there. Your side has plenty of things I think are delusional too, but I still see you as a person, as an individual, outside of all that. "How can it not go there?" he shot back. "This isn't some policy disagreement. This is reality. You get worked up over surface level shit, but when it comes to something actually serious, you shrug. You don't even want to know." The thing is, he wasn't wrong, just not in the way he thought. I didn't care anymore. Not about the narratives, not about the algorithms, not about the outrage cycles, or which political side was supposedly winning. It all felt like theater. I made videos because they paid the bills. That was it, and I wasn't alone. But I didn't say that, not then. He wouldn't have heard it. He wasn't just angry at me. He was mourning something bigger, the idea of some unity in the world, a friendship with me. Maybe even the idea of a relationship with his own mother, who was a staunch Trump supporter. He felt all these people were choosing delusion over reality, and that was costing them their relationship with him. "I've got to get to the wedding," I said, grabbing my purse. "I'm gonna come back early and we can talk more. If not, just leave the door unlocked when you head to the airport." He didn't look up. "Yeah, okay, bud." I left, flustered. It was a strange contrast, moving from Ashley's apartment and my fight with Steven to the wedding. It was perfect, elegant, cheerful, tightly choreographed. I made my way to the Mia table, which was basically a containment zone for Sean's more chaotic friends, the YouTubers, political commentators, a former Trump staffer I attended the first inauguration with. Everyone else, his high school friends, extended family, normal people, were spread across the rest of the venue, blissfully unaware of the ideological minefield clustered at table 12. We were bantering, catching up, sipping drinks, and gossiping about media drama when I felt my bone fuzz. A text. "Trump got shot." I blinked at the screen, thinking it was some kind of joke. Then I looked up. One of the others at the table had clearly gotten the same message. His eyes widened. Phones came out instantly. Notifications started flying. The table conversation was consumed. Holy shit, was it more than one shot? Did they catch the guy? Wait, someone died? Not Trump, a guy in the crowd. The table had become a command center. Phones buzzed nonstop, heads bowed, everyone tweeting, calling sources, confirming reports. Two of the guys suddenly leapt up and rushed to find the groom. Sean, grinning, suited up, fully in the moment, laughed and waved them off with a look that, I don't care if an asteroid hits the planet, this is my wedding day. He sent them back to the Twitter panic table with nothing but a smile. Hours passed, dancing, vaping on the lawn, more tweets. We tried to relax, but it hovered in the air like smoke. Something world-shifting had just happened. But for now, we were watching people slow dance in a heritage building surrounded by gardens and sipping champagne. Later in the evening, while the music thinned and the last drink circled the table, someone suddenly said, "Holy shit, do you guys see what Destiny tweeted?" My stomach turned. What did he do? Someone passed me a phone. A tweet was open on the screen. Donald Trump incited an insurrection and then was granted full criminal immunity for possibly all of his involvement. I have zero sympathy for anything that happens to him or anyone who supports him. What the hell was he doing? I fired off an X reply without thinking, telling Steven he was being completely unhinged. Seconds later, he responded publicly. A person in the crowd cheering for and supporting a traitor to this country caught astray? I'm so sad, please. Oh yeah, I kind of remember this actually. Holy crap, but she was there, huh? Okay, damn. Everyone at the table was staring now, reading, murmuring. One guy said, "Is he insane?" Another, "Should we do a story on this?" And then it hit me like a slap. None of them knew. None of them knew I had been with him this morning. That he was in Elon Musk's girlfriend's apartment right now, Ashley's place, sending these tweets. I checked the time, almost midnight. I've got to head out, I said, grabbing my coat. It happened to coincide with others calling their Ubers. No one thought twice. In the back of the Uber, I kept scrolling, tweet after tweet, articles, screenshots, thousands of voices calling for the end of Steven's career. Demands for bans, YouTube, Kick, X, every platform. Commentators from my world were already circulating his posts as proof. This is why we can never coexist with the left. This is war always has been. The same lines recycled and sharpened. They hate us, they want us dead, and now we have the proof. And there he was, Steven, Exhibit A, the perfect villain in the perfect storm. I sat there, lit by the glow of my phone screen, feeling like I was watching someone I knew disappear in real time. Tweet by tweet, frame by frame, he was becoming something unrecognizable, not just to them, but to me, maybe to himself. I practically burst through the door at Ashley's apartment, swooshing the train of my dress inside before slamming it behind me. What are you doing, Steven? What are you saying? You're destroying your career, your life. You don't actually believe any of this. He looked up from the couch, totally calm, hit send on another tweet. I looked down at my phone. He wasn't doubling down, he was tripling, quadrupling down, every minute more fire. He was blowing up everything. His career, his reputation, maybe even his mind. Why do you even have a problem with this, Lauren? He snapped playfully. This is what your side does all the time. You cheer when protesters die. Why the fuck can't my side do it? That's not what this is, and you know it. I marched over and grabbed the phone out of his hand. Hey, give me that, he shot, half laughing, half panicked. I'm serious, Steven. You're going to regret this. I pushed him back with one arm, holding the phone out of reach with the other, frantically trying to delete tweets off his timeline. I managed to nuke one, starting an argument with Matt Walsh, another caustic reply to a thread afterwards. Stop, you can't delete those, he yelled, lunging toward me. I'll look crazy if I delete them now. You'll look crazy if you don't. I kept wiping the phone just out of reach, dangling over the edge of the couch while scrolling. Steven leaned in, reaching for my wrist, and we started to tip as Steven got a hold of the device. Then we rolled, straight over the couch. The phone shot out of Steven's hand mid-roll and clattered across the hardwood, skidding all the way into the kitchen. For a second, we both froze, propped up on our arms, breathing hard, eyes locked like we were playing a deranged game of capture the flag. Then we bolted. Steven scrambled forward just as my hand slapped the floor, landing inches short. He snatched the phone with a triumphant grin, raising above his head like he just scored a touchdown. He tossed out some snarky comment about victory that I was too infuriated to register. He locked his phone with a dramatic flourish. I stared at him, breathless, fuming, still half on the floor. It wasn't funny, but somehow it was. Steven, delete those tweets. Absolutely not, he said, grinning like he was high on adrenaline, like it wasn't real. We sat in silence for a beat, the weight of the room pressing in. My heart was racing, but I kept my voice calm. If I were shot at one of those rallies, would you cheer it on? I asked quietly. If your mother were shot. Steven didn't flinch, he didn't hesitate. Well, it'd be your decision to go there, wouldn't it? He snapped. I wouldn't be happy about it, but fuck, that's your choice. That was it. I didn't want to talk anymore. I didn't think he believed what he was saying. Not really. Maybe he didn't even know if he believed it. Only he knows. We tried to end on a positive note, some weak joke about Twitter brain rot, but it was hollow. We capped the night with a single shot each of Tesla and Nijo. Ironically, the next day, Elon will be publicly debating whether to pull ads from Stephen X's account, and no idea who those tweets had been fired off from his girlfriend's apartment. His account has been demonetized since that day. There were many words after that. We hugged and both understood the line had been drawn. We were on opposite sides of whatever this was. I didn't even know anymore. I hope he might help me make sense of it. But he was lost to the same war I walked away from long ago. He left to catch his flight. I got in the shower, then cozied up in bed, staring at the ceiling. The glow of city lights slipping through the blinds. I come here hoping for clarity about my work, about the internet, maybe even about whether I still had a friend, but now I just felt more fractured than before. More alone. Everything felt impossibly fucked. I can't keep living like this. Somewhere in the quiet, I drifted off. Steve and I never saw each other again after that. Holy shit. Yo, is this on the internet? Like, if I just Google right now, because other people have to read this part, right? Destiny sent tweets from Ashley St. Clair's apartment. Wow, I don't think a lot of them know this, huh? I don't really see anything about this. Holy crap. So that's what's really going on, huh?
Chapter 24, Red Scare. The DOJ indictment dropped on September 4, 2024. Tenet Media, the company for which I had worked for the last year, was being shut down for allegedly being funded by the Russians, the Kremlin to be specific. I was sitting in my car outside my office when my phone started blowing up. Friends were asking if I'd seen it. My Apple News alert showed the photo of my face next to the other host. I laughed like Weez laughed. Of course, of course. My life wasn't a tragedy or success story. It was a Greek tragic comedy playing out on an absurd modern stage. What next, really? What next? My contract with Tenet had expired a few weeks earlier in August. I let it lapse while I tried to figure out what to do next, not just with my job, but with my entire life online. I didn't judge the people who planned to stay. Most had only ever been decent to me. My bosses were polite, professional, and yet I've been in political media for 10 years, long enough to know when something fell off. It didn't really matter if I didn't have proof. My gut told me to leave the company, that it was part of the larger apparatus where strings were pulled. I certainly wasn't about to go running to the government with complaints about a company I had no concrete accusations against, especially not when the people behind it had treated me well. I wasn't interested in throwing anyone under the bus, guilty or innocent. I knew how easy it was to get trapped in these systems without even realizing it. I certainly didn't know anyone else's full story, just like they couldn't possibly know mine. And besides, it's not like I trusted the government either. Deep down, I had the same gnawing feeling about their role in all of this, that they were running their own influence campaigns, spinning all their own narratives. Maybe I couldn't prove every threat, but the feeling was there and it wasn't going away. All I knew was this: Rose said I had to leave, but I hadn't found an exit yet. I spent the month of August searching and came up empty. So when Tenet called to discuss renewing my contract, I picked up. I still had a kid to feed. Maybe, I thought, I could buy a little more time, a softer landing, before I figured out how to leave for good. But sometimes the universe doesn't wait for you to make the decisions you're supposed to. Sometimes it tears the ground out from under you and says you're leaving now whether you're ready or not. The day after that call, the DOJ indictment dropped, the company was gone. After the shock, I felt something like peace, or maybe resignation. The world was weird. I hadn't been imagining it. I wasn't sane, exactly, but I wasn't entirely delusional either. That counted for something. The relief, though, didn't last long. It evaporated the moment the headlines rolled in. What I thought might finally affirm my sanity, the big aha moment where everything clicked into place, instead became its own spiral of madness. Every outlet turned the story into something more deranged than the thing they were supposedly warning about. And somewhere in the chaos of headlines and group chats, I learned that not only was I allegedly part of a Kremlin plot, but I was also being underpaid for the privilege. I was the top performing creator at the company, producing the most content, pulling the most views, and still somehow earning among the lowest. Peers like Dave Rubin and Tim Pool were reportedly pulling up millions. Me, a single mom juggling scripts and school pickup, barely clearing 100k CAD after operational cost. What feminist witch cast this spell on me? I have to tattoo girl boss or something on my forehead to break the curse? I did the math. On a per video basis, I was making less than 2% of what some of my male counterparts earned. The wage gap in alleged foreign influence campaigns truly atrocious. No one was more upset with Putin than me, I assure you. On a serious note, I had hoped a real conversation about the broader influence campaigns happening all around us would start. But no, instead, the press inflated a crumbling little media startup, where half the hosts couldn't crack 1,000 views and painted it as the Kremlin's nerve center for deciding Western elections. It was complete unreality. Manufactured chaos, and worse, the scandal became the perfect scapegoat for everything wrong at home here in Canada. Suddenly, complaints about immigration rates and infrastructure were allegedly Russia's fault. As for attempts to sow division, whether successful or not, the worst part is the Russians didn't even need to. Corporations, domestic media, and interest groups were already doing a stellar job. Remember the mass grave scandal in Canada in the summer of 2021? To this day, not a single body has been found at the Kamloops site, which kicked off the whole story. Yet the damage was done. Mass psychological trauma for indigenous communities. Dozens of torched church, millions in tax dollars gone, and a country more divided than ever. All without a single Russian lifting a finger. And now these clowns were acting like my housing crisis mini-doc was some Kremlin psyop, as if Putin personally whispered it to me while I was microwaving leftovers and bitching in the group chat about Zillow listings. These idiots had missed the only point worth taking from the whole scandal. Humans have figured out you can profit by manipulating people. Every nation is doing it. Russia, China, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Iran, India, Israel, even the United States. Every one of them is paying influencers for endorsements and PR trips. I had seen it firsthand. In fact, Tenet may be the dumbest example of foreign interference, given the total freedom discretion hosts were given in their publications. I fear they may have driven people further into the curated delusion by convincing them Tenet was the odd one out. Even individuals are curating the internet in our minds. I mean, obviously, you have millionaires inflating their virality. Fools like Andrew Tate are paying people to repost and remix his content to game the algorithm. I mean, technically, Andrew Tate's content's kind of sick, not gonna lie. Earlier this year, I did an interview that supposedly got to 100,000 views, but I'm convinced almost none of those were real. No buzz, no mentions, no traffic spikes, just a wall of near-identical comments from bot accounts. The channel owner had bought his views and built his fake reputation on it, and it was working. I thought it was a legitimate show. He even got a bunch of other commentators to come on, all tricked the same way. Okay, well that's interesting, bro. What a way to build a career, just by bots to influence, like, artificially inflate your fame. That's a weird way to, I've never thought about that before. As Turning Point USA event in 2023, I got approached by a woman from a Chinese media outlet after a few fans had asked for photos. She said she was a huge fan but couldn't name a single video. Then she handed me a form asking for an interview, my full contact info, and socials. I declined, so naturally my friends decided to have a little fun. They introduced the outlet to one or more eccentric acquaintances, a sweet, awkward guy who lives for political memes and internet chaos. They gave him a fake name and pretended he was a famous Latino journalist. They bought it, interviewed him, ran the full segment with the fake name and everything. It was hilarious and horrifying. It wasn't even about information anymore, just control. Who cares what they're saying or who they are, as long as they're famous and we can rope them into our influence web, willingly or not. Or hell, why not just invent some influence from scratch? New micro creators were popping up everywhere with no history, no context, no natural origin story. Who the hell were these people? The media landscape was cooked, and I was starting to see it everywhere. People think they care about the truth. What they really care about is being on the right side, whatever they think that means. I saw it in the comments on the Toronto Star article about me and the Tenet situation. One brand, even if she didn't know who she was working for, is discussing to promote Russian propaganda while Ukrainians are dying. There have to be consequences. I wonder if people like that had ever met a Ukrainian. I knew they hadn't watched a single one of my Tenet videos. What did they think counted as propaganda? Once again, my critiques of immigration policy, housing costs, free speech concerns in the UK. A few weeks earlier, I was at a party chatting with 2 Ukrainian refugees while our kids played nearby. One of them nearly made me spit out my drink laughing when she asked, "Why are you guys destroying your country with immigration?" She was highly educated, sharp, and clear-eyed. Her biggest fear for her daughter's future in Canada was that the country lacked cultural cohesion.
Later, we talked about the war. I mentioned that people here label my views Russian disinformation. She rolled her eyes and said that's what Russia wants, to make sanity itself seem like siding with them. But she also admitted the deeper truth. Her life, her country was being used, not just by Russia, but by Western powers too. She paused, then said something that haunted me. It's like Squid Game. She didn't mean it as a joke. She and her family had lost real friends to that game. We talked for hours about losing touch with reality during traumatic experiences, about how Westerners watch their suffering like it's Netflix. I told her I understood more like I used to. I've been part of the distortion machine myself. In private, I've heard similar things from friends on the ground in Ukraine. Reporters whose footage was deleted, stories rewritten, narratives replaced. I don't blame Ukraine, they're at war. Controlling information is survival. But if you so much as question the decided narrative, the SBU might erase you entirely. People die for less. Meanwhile, back home, commentators in $3,000 condos scream about Russian propaganda while reposting AI-generated Ghost of Kiev videos without blinking. They don't know. They don't want to know. It's not just Russia playing this game, everyone is. Our minds are in the new battleground. And I had been caught right in the middle of it. I didn't even get the chance to figure out what any of it meant before the real-world consequences landed. Within hours of the DOJ indictment, I was sitting in my family's lawyer's backyard on a conference call with a criminal attorney who flew in the next day and booked us a private room in a downtown high-rise. Phones in a closet, shades drawn. She spent the next 3 hours calmly explaining how the feds might try to flip my friends into informants. How every email I'd ever sent could be turned into evidence. I nodded like I understood, but I didn't. Not really. I was still thinking theory, boss pattern shadow campaigns. She was talking about Sapiona's dispositions and arrests. It all felt like LARPing to me. Take care of yourself, she said. Try not to lose your mind. That's the most important part of this whole process. And maybe she was right, because I was already halfway there. I walked out of her office completely unsure what to do with my life, hence the art classes. I ended up my last therapy session with my lawyers told me I can't talk to you anymore. She smiled at me kindly, her brows slightly furrowed with concern, and wished me well. The days that followed were a blur. Emails, headlines, 3 a.m., ceiling stares. Wonder if the lawyers were just fear-mongering for a paycheck or if there were actually a chance I was in serious trouble. Surely not, right? I wasn't supposed to socialize much, but if I did, if only a little. Of course, people began reaching out, mostly out of curiosity, wanting the dirt and details. Hundreds of journalists contacted me. I received thousands of death wishes via email, DMs, and comments. CNN had mistakenly reported that my name was a pseudonym for the company owner, so the threats quickly escalated. I lie in bed at night, deleting Instagram comments by the hundreds. Your time is coming, Russian whore. Ah, lovely, delete. You're going to jail, bitch. Wonderful, delete. Just quietly wondering what the moms from my local community would think if they happened to scroll past my idyllic Inya Summer swimming photo and saw the absolute war zone that was my comments section. Then came the phone calls. I have no idea how the Associated Press or the New York Times or every other mainstream outlet got my number, but they did. Sorry, most famous news outlets in America. I'm too busy cleaning up Legos and wondering if I'm going to jail to explain foreign influence campaigns to you today. I also had an old contact stream pretending to spark a genuine conversation, only for it to eventually turn into, so can you give my friend at Insert Magazine a statement about the indictment? I want to say you find out who your real friends are when a DOJ indictment investigating your employer drops and worldwide media start reporting that you're a Russian asset. But in truth, you just find out some of your friends are complicated human beings, equally as confused and afraid of the world as you have been at points in your life. They say only the good die young. I think there's some truth to that. There is a purity in youth and naivety, a sort of true dedication to morals without the weight of adulthood. Once you get people concerned about their bills and children, all bets are off. It makes me feel a little sick to think about it, but aside from my family, I look at some of the people in my life and wonder now if they'd send me to a gulag to make a mortgage payment. Statements like, but of course if you were guilty or if anything you should go to jail from friends were etched into my memory. Their need to virtue signal for seemingly invisible honest at my expense in a private conversation was surprising to say the least. It made me reflect on how easily I could get caught up in something dangerous and how few people would truly stand by me. Worse, if the government ever began abusing these people under the guise of law, would those around me stay silent? Would some even report me? I think they might. I study how authoritarian regimes take hold, but until now, I hadn't understood on a personal level. I mean, technically, if the Canadian government hadn't carved out those exemptions for contracts signed before sanctions, some people I once trusted might truly have believed I deserved prison. I'm sure there are plenty who still do, but very small handfuls stood by me. People who said, I don't care to know anymore. You're someone I love and I've got your back. Very small, but enough. And what a beautiful thing it is to watch people step into the wreckage and say thank you. Wreckage and stay. Thank you. In a world where social clout is currency, I know I can be a costly friend, and in uncertain times, guilt by association weighs heavily. My life's been messy, but as I untangle the chaos, what I look forward to most is learning how to be a better friend. I'm still in the chaos though, and still unsure if that light at the end of the tunnel is hope or just another train. As I write this, I'm 2 days away from testifying before the House of Commons Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security during the hearings on Russian disinformation in Canada. They invited me voluntarily. I declined. Then they voted to compel me. Fine, who knows how that'll go. As I mentioned, I've let my lawyers go. They were expensive, unavailable, and offered almost no advice beyond don't talk to anyone. Their strategy was full retreat, no posting, no travel, disappear entirely if needed. Oh, and if a federal agent shows up, tell them to fuck right off. Bro, okay. In my opinion, it wasn't great advice, and I'll go broke if I keep following it, especially with $400 per text bills. Part of me thinks it's all a joke to them. Another sees how overworked and detached they are. Criminal lawyers, like politicians, often seem disoriented. When you live in constant madness, it's easy to disassociate. It becomes more about money and stories than people. So that bad advice was only worth the cost. It forced me to pause, reflect, and shut up for a moment. Something I probably wouldn't have done on my own. Almost every single one of my peers that attended immediately went back to work, treating the entire accusation as a joke. I understand why they did this. First, they were safer in the US with stronger legal protections, and second, the way the media and commentators framed the charges made the whole thing seem laughable. A few years ago, I probably would have laughed along, but I was already deep in an existential spiral. After everything, the boss, the rabbit holes, the patterns, I couldn't just brush it off. It wasn't even about guilt or innocence anymore. It was, why am I doing any of this? What I had set out to be had been lost. I was no longer the idealistic outsider making documentaries to break cycles. I become the broken adult churning out recycled takes for a paycheck. I don't even believe the videos I was making were helping people. I think they were numbing them, giving them an easy scapegoat for their personal pain instead of encouraging real self-reflection. I could have fixated on the foolishness of people thinking the Russians were writing my scripts or ranted about the way every faction of media, left, right, domestic, foreign, was locked in a race to the bottom. I could have mapped out the funny webs and pointed fingers at the players behind the curtain, but none of that would change the core truth. I was still part of it. I didn't belong here, and deep down I knew it. I wasn't waking up and making the world better. I was just surviving inside a broken machine, hoping no one noticed I hated it too. So I took the tennis shutdowns, the final message from God, get out. That was it. No more spiraling, no more dissecting bots or finding trails. No more convincing myself I could fix the problem from the inside. I couldn't. I was part of it, and if I stayed, I'd lose the last sliver of myself that still had some heart. So I stopped, canceled shoots, let edits sit half finished on my desktop, didn't upload to my own channel, turned down jobs, even the ones I could have really used. I told myself I was taking a break, but deep down, I knew it was a final pause before I became someone I couldn't stand. If I didn't walk away now, I wasn't going to walk away at all. I started doing things that had nothing to do with politics. Mostly alone at first, ice cold swims each morning to remind myself I had a body, that I was here, not out there on the screen. It helped reset my nervous system, bring me into the present. I sat outside just to sit outside. I let myself be born. I let myself just be. Yo, you know what? I like that because now she's saying that, right? She says, I let myself be born. I let myself just be. She is being herself, right? And as she bees herself, she lets herself be boring because maybe that's just how she really is, boring. And that's fine, right? Because I mean, I wish it was fine. Just be boring. It's okay. I mean, even if you're boring, like, everyone's interesting in a way as long as you just know much about them. Problem is, if you're being boring, it's kind of hard to, I always say it's hard to fit in with other people or, like, start a conversation. Then do you need to fake at that point? Anyways, first I had to remember it all. That's how this book started. Yeah, okay. And then that's the end of chapter 24. Next chapter is chapter 25. It's called Purifying Fire. Okay. I always wondered if these backgrounds are AI generated or something. Alright, anyways, chapter 25 is called Purifying Fire. In just 3 hours, I'm set to testify before the House of Commons, and yesterday, while I was at the airport, the internet finally caught up to what I'd finally already confided to you. That my relationship with Steven was completely at odds with the curated narrative of our rivalry. Naturally, I'm now a traitor in the eyes of the culture war for having shown affection to a leftist. If you remember that Family Guy scene where Brian tweets something offensive before going to a movie and walks out an hour later to find he's been cancelled, well, that's basically been my relationship with air travel. I used to get anxious just stepping onto a plane, dreading the moment I reconnect to the internet. My flight to Ottawa was no different. The second I landed for my connection, my phone exploded. Calls, tweets, messages, tens of thousands of strangers calling me every name imaginable. To make matters worse, news articles were already circulating, alleging I had an affair. In reality, my marriage had been over for quite some time before my deepening relationship with Steven. We never pursued anything formal. Uh, It wasn't dating, and frankly, I hadn't even considered that the term cheating could apply in an open relationship like Steven had until the internet told me otherwise. It doesn't matter though, I knew deep in my gut I wasn't making wise decisions. Now I've got random women messaging me, don't talk to my husband, as if I'm out here running a one-woman husband collection agency. I couldn't be less interested in your man whose DMs go straight to my spam folder, ma'am. If anything, I'm dangerously close to never speaking to another human being again. What started as a shared bond over the invasiveness of public life unraveled fast. I don't believe Steven leaked my messages to the world on purpose, but the whole thing devolved into some convoluted mess involving a malicious leaker when Steven forwarded our conversations to another girl for advice. The recklessness made me facepalm so hard I nearly concussed myself. I couldn't even be mad. My own idiocracy had led me here. Steven had even told me verbatim, I tend to ruin the lives of everyone I get close to. The messages that did surface, of mine anyway, weren't that scandalous, just the kind of melodramatic, cringy stuff you expect from someone quietly having a life breakdown. You've got the most incredible mind I've ever met, followed by a cute emoji face, was particularly popular. It was more embarrassing than anything, still the timing was unreal. For a moment, I genuinely wondered if my federal agent had hacked his account. Surprise, your pre-testimony gift. My phone wouldn't shut up. Calls, notifications, thousands of alerts piling in. My cringiest, sappiest messages being read out loud in mocking tones on live streams. Kill me now. Overwhelmed, I ducked into an airport bathroom and had a small cry, but it didn't last long. The absurdity of it all hit me. I ended up laughing, just me, standing over a sink, giggling like a lunatic. At a certain point, to exist online is a teeter on the edge of mania. You start asking yourself, how much more surreal can this get? How many layers deeper into madness can it possibly go? If it weren't for all the uncomfortable self-reflection I've been forced into lately, I'd probably have catatonic levels of trust issues. At least I can say I earned this reckoning. I don't think everyone else involved can say the same. I generally don't know whether politics has always been this dysfunctional or if I have a unique talent for attracting the most unhinged of every subculture. On the bright side, I've earned a PhD in public humiliation, perfect credentials for writing this book. This is what I mean when I say I feel like I can't escape. I've been offline for months, and yet old dramas from years ago keep clawing their way back into relevance while being twisted beyond recognition. And now somehow the government is forcing me to participate in a live stream debate under threat of arrest. How is any of this even real? Nobody in government is happy with me, and there's little sympathy online either. Oh well, I got myself into this mess, and the only way out of now is forward. I wouldn't wish public humiliation or the relentless dissection of one's failures on anyone, but strangely, it's been kind of liberation. I don't have much right to self-pity anyway. I've commented on things I didn't fully grasp and passed judgment on people from fragments of their lives. It's poetic, really, a purifying fire. Every questionable decision I've ever made rising up to confront me all at once, and for the first time in a decade, I'm not dissociating. I'm here journaling, trying to learn something from this cosmic karma. Let me pause real quick, alright? Because I'm going to go back, and she said something. She said, nobody in government is happy with me, and there's little sympathy online either. And that somehow the government is forcing her to participate in a live stream debate under the threat of arrest, alright? Like, you know, we in society, we have a lot of this talk about, yo, mental health. Are you feeling suicidal? Here's the National Suicide Hotline crisis. Or, you know, if you're feeling down, talk to somebody and stuff. We encourage this, like, culture, right? So, like, yo, if you're in trouble, talk. Like, we can, some people are there to help you out, right? But when it comes down to it, like right over here, you can kind of see what actually kind of happened, you know, and it's kind of sad, really. And I think stuff like this where people don't really trust like governmental services or like just talking or like getting the help you need, it becomes hard to trust like who is the one that actually wants to help you when they're like, look at her, like everyone around her, as she puts it, is trying to bring her down, you know. So that's crazy. Ugh. I wish I had some clever insight to wrap this up, but honestly, I'm still in it, just trying to keep my head above water. I've been disappointed in people before, but this chapter's been different. People have shown up in ways I never expected, offering support, kind words, and even laughter. A friend of mine who works at the Daily Wire keeps tossing out alternative responses for me to give the MPs. Just tell them, Your Honor, I'm just a girl. I'm just alright. You know what? Alright, now, like this is good, right? These people are the good people, the people that actually like are still like being nice to you, even though like you're in your rut, right? Your Honor, I'm just a girl. Or accuse them of being obsessed and flirting with you. We've been on the phone, wheezing with laughter as we brainstorm ridiculously unparliamentary ways to refer to the Prime Minister. I don't care much for politics anymore, but it's moments like these, laughing with friends, not taking it all so seriously, that remind me there's more to life than headlines and hot takes. The real world is bigger, messier, and a lot funnier. The trouble starts when we forget that and start pretending we've got it all figured out. Still, I need to figure some of it out in the next few hours. Right now, I'm pacing my hotel room at the Embassy Suites, typing away, muttering answers for the committee, hoping that whatever I say this afternoon might do a little good, or at least no harm. Of course, I find myself in yet another crisis, one I've been navigating for the last 10 years. I'll be in a room full of people who are dedicated to framing me as far right, not because of my beliefs, but because every question they ask assumes guilt. They won't ask if I'm racist, they'll ask why. Push back and they will take it as proof you are what they've already decided. Yes, I made choices that led me here, but it's also clear that both media and politics need villains. Someone to scapegoat, distract, and draw attention. Immigration became that issue for me. I never hated immigrants, I've been one, but I've repeatedly argued that immigration must be sustainable on a culture, language, and infrastructure level for integration to succeed for good outcomes for both locals and migrants alike. Without these considerations, communities begin to fracture and entire nation starts to unravel at the seams. Ironically, though, the issue of immigration rates may have been the one topic I spoke about with a background of lived experience and thus had a slightly more accurate pulse on the issue. Unlike, say, my commentary on marriage. I grew up in one of the highest zones for immigration in Canada, where the challenges of integration were real and visible. When I was younger, I definitely articulated these views gracelessly because I was basically still a teenager with a big ego who thought she knew everything. And sure, inflammatory content got more views, which didn't help, but that doesn't mean the core concerns I raised, or those raised by countless others from all backgrounds, were wrong. In fact, fast forward to today, immigration has become a major political issue that, remarkably, is becoming bipartisan across the globe. The UK Labour leadership has confessed their migration levels are catastrophically high. Australia's left-wing government announced plans last year to halve their net migration. The Liberal government in Canada just significantly reduced immigration numbers to address the strain on infrastructure, housing costs, and hospital lines. Why? Because they had to. The rates have been unsustainable and are causing drastic problems, as I predicted. Of course, openly admitting mistakes on immigration would be politically risky, though, especially with an election approaching and Pierre Poilievre leading the Conservatives. Years of criticism from the right mean any acknowledgement of failure could damage the Liberal government, so instead, the strategy is to quietly reverse the policy while discrediting critics, find a scapegoat. In politics, admitting error isn't allowed. It's not a sport of introspection or humility. So when I walk into that room to testify, I can assure you none of this context will matter. Even though the hearing is supposed to focus on tenant media and my work there, I doubt the Liberal MPs will ask a single question about that content, let alone have watched any of it. Instead, they'll dig up some clumsy quote from 8 years ago, maybe even a diary entry from grade school if they could, and demand I defend it under oath. This dynamic plays out in both directions. I've seen perfectly reasonable criticisms from the left dismissed as snowflake meltdowns, communist nonsense, or deep state propaganda by the right. Whatever your politics, the name of the game is to find a label that will ensure no one takes your critics seriously or, God forbid, listens to them in the first place. What better label to give your critics than that of a traitor, to label them purveyors of Russian disinformation allies of an enemy in a physical war? In another world, I would have welcomed the chance to speak with these politicians about real issues. Foreign interference, media manipulation, corporate narratives, my time in Russia, and being politically banned in places not like Australia. There's no shortage of bad actors worth exposing, but they're not interested in that. They want to force Tenet and me into a narrative that serves their agenda. All in all, I'm just bracing for the circus tomorrow. I do my best to explain myself clearly and hopefully make some small differences in the process. I don't know if I will, but at the very least, I'll speak my damn mind. That is chapter 25. You know what? Do you think we can find this? Lauren Southern testifies Tenet Media. Is it Canadian government? Alright.
Someone posing
Oh,
as
damn,
Edward
it's real.
Gregorian.
No, the call I had well over a year ago now that signed me up for the company, I was told vaguely drivers. And in fact, I had a documentary with the company that was at around 10,000
Okay.
views for a long time. And mere days before the indictment dropped, it was at millions. So I think the numbers, and I know that there were ad campaigns done to promote the videos, but I think the numbers have been massively inflated by those who have an interest in
Alright, she said live stream debate. I thought something different, but this is just testifying. Yeah, it is live. True.
exaggerating
A white population with a non-white population.
the call. And I had no reason to be suspicious. Of course, I was.
If there's a
During my trip to Russia, I did interview quite a few other subjects.
You went to Russia, if I'm not mistaken, you were barred from going to the UK, is that correct?
Yes, I was barred from going to the UK.
And why was that?
That was because I tried to set up a pride parade in Luton, and the Islamic population.
Voice is a bit deeper. Than
If
I
you
thought.
think that there was a action I should have or could have taken that the average person would normally do, please do let me know, Mr. Johns.
Oh my god, dude.
will you take any?
Do you think you can like tell, like there's something called physiognomy, right? Physiognomy, whatever, where you just look at someone's face and you can like tell about the personality. You think you can just look at her face, you can tell that she's going through all of these like life crises?
Person would normally do, please do let me. They were trying to get me to go.
Wait, what did she say?
If you think that there was a action I should have or
Do you think there's an action I
could
should
have
have
taken that the average person would normally do,
that the average person would normally do?
please do let me know, Mr. Johns.
Will
Let
you
me
take
know.
any in the future? Will you be doing any significant efforts to ensure that that the people are paying you are legitimate and don't have ulterior motives? Is this something that you're going to incorporate into your future business model?
I have always worked very hard to ensure that the things I am doing are legitimate, that I'm not being influenced by anyone. I've lost jobs over this. Now, there is a lot of money, as I'm sure you know. Probably not the majority coming from Russia, probably more from China, other countries going into politics, going into media, going into influencing what people think. The way I protect myself from that, because it is a completely messed up and influenced media organization system going on right now, ecosystem, is I only sign contracts with people who give me full creative control. Because right now in the Blitz, they were trying to get me to go and do a film on the Donbass region before airing. That was interest myself because I don't.
TikTok, Meta, and YouTube have all removed Tenet.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't work for these social media companies.
Knowing what you do now about the Tenet Media and where their money was coming from, would you do anything differently?
Yeah, I wouldn't have worked for them if I knew where the money was coming from.
Rebel News. No, she got a lot of support here though. No, it's pretty good. Okay. Chapter 26, Affront to Democracy. My flight home from Ottawa landed just over an hour ago. I'm sitting at a pub in Vancouver, grabbing a bite before I head home. The entire Uber ride was a blur of sobbing. I'm sure the driver was pretty confused. Oh well. I did incredibly well at the hearing. I don't often say that about myself, but it's objectively true. My phone blew up the second I walked out of the House of Commons. Every friend and colleague, regardless of their political leanings, was congratulating me for eviscerating every politician in that room, Liberal, Conservative, and NDP alike. I was so undeniably in the right that even the CBC approached me afterward, lamenting the treatment I received from the government and asking for an interview. Every prediction made about their behavior was entirely correct. Just a year ago, I could have only dreamed of a moment like this. Clips of my performance are blowing up, and even my harshest critics are applauding the courage I showed. While I won't share on social media myself, I think this is one of the greatest moments of my media career. So why on earth am I sobbing? Well, let me take you through the whole House of Commons saga first. Join me on my mental journey if you will. I'm a klutz, always have been. Just the other day, I was having tea with Hillary Crowder, the ex-wife of political commentator Steven Crowder. Steven Crowder. That's Destiny then, right? Okay. We became good friends over our mutual disillusionment with the theater of political media. As I sat down with my tea, I somehow managed to pick up my mug and pour half of it on my lap. I had to leave the coffee shop to change. Hillary just looked at me, laughed graciously, and asked, "What happened?" It felt like my wrist had been possessed by some invisible force. I generally couldn't explain it. If something can go wrong in my life, it usually does, but it's given me a great sense of humor about disaster. It also keeps me very prepared for anything. The night before my trip to the House of Commons, I packed carefully, one primary outfit and a backup, just in case I spill more tea on my lap. I opted for a carry-on, knowing that if I checked the bag, it would likely get lost, because, well, it's me. I took the second to last flight to Ottawa so that if I missed it, I still have time to catch a later one. I packed nail glue, twice the number of socks and underwear I need, and a ton of sleeping pills. I landed and got to my hotel around 2 a.m. My nerves were through the roof. I prayed for rest and comfort, and miraculously my prayers were answered. I fell asleep more soundly than I had in weeks. With my lawyers gone, I called a few friends to ask them to play the role of MPs, firing off potential questions they thought might come my way. We spent hours on the phone laughing. It was a brief moment of normalcy amidst an otherwise chaotic whirlwind. I chatted with them while waiting for an Uber to deliver an umbrella and some folders to put my notes in. God forbid the rain caused any problems. Nothing could go wrong. An hour before the hearing, I stood in front of the mirror, dressed in with my shoulders back and chin held high. I looked sharp, like a woman who knows exactly what she's doing. Yet I still barely recognize the professional version of myself. I still feel like I'm playing dress up, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I'll imagine everyone else in the hearing room the same way. It's a more honest perspective on life. The kid in me needed some confidence, so I popped in my AirPods and queued up the Gladiator soundtrack, blasting "Now We Are Free" as I clipped my necklace behind my turtleneck. Listen, sometimes you gotta feel like you're in a movie to summon the performance you need. I gave myself one last nod of affirmation and ordered my Uber. When I arrived at the House of Commons, the security outside informed me that I needed to check in at different visitors' buildings a few blocks away. With only 10 minutes to get to the hearing room, I begged them to let me through to the House of Commons security, and thankfully they did. The room was completely empty, with 4 staff members twiddling their thumbs, all too happy to sort me out. Funny how efficient things can be when you just bypass bureaucracy. After scanning my bags and jacket, they handed me a pass and let me through, though not before warning me that the building was a maze. You're going to want to go all the way right, then all the way left, into the stairwell, and then all the way down. Great, no problem. I had 6 minutes to spare. When I stepped out of the security room, I was hit with vertigo. The House of Commons hallway stretched out before me, plain and endless. With dozens of doors lining the walls, I turned a corner and was met with more of the same soul-sucking beige walls and endless doors with dark brown trim. No windows and all very sinister looking. As I walked, I finally spotted a stairwell sign in the distance. Relief, I made it. No flight delays, no lost luggage, not a single spill on my outfit, and my notes snug in their folder. I was here with 5 minutes to spare. I pushed the stairwell door open and descended, then down again and again and again until I found myself in a concrete hallway with swinging light fixtures. It truly looked like the part of a parliament where, if every online conspiracy theory were true, they'd be trafficking children. Where the hell was I? None of the doors on my way to the murder basement even referenced the room I was supposed to be in. Okay, I thought, this is fine. I just need to find my way back to the floor I was on and go back to security for guidance. Simple enough, right? I headed back up the stairs, anxiously checking the time on my phone. As I marched up, I began to notice a pattern. Each door was locked with a black keycard access fob. Oh shit. When I got to the floor I'd entered from, there it was again, the black fob access box. The door was locked. I had somehow locked myself in the stairwell of the House of Commons mere minutes before I needed to be in the testimony room. I could account for just about every disaster that could happen, but this kind of idiocracy. This was my special brand of genius. I peered through the tiny rectangle in the door like a lost puppy at the pound. Please, someone see me, choose me, open this damn door, but the hallway was empty. Just a blank, haunting corridor full of rooms, all gnawing away at Canadians' hard-earned money. I sat on the concrete stairs, frantically flipping through my emails to find the committee's clerk's contact info. When I spotted his phone number at the bottom, I nearly jumped with relief. Would it be humiliating to admit I locked myself in a stairwell? Probably, but did I want to be charged with contempt of parliament? Not really. The clerk who answered the phone replied with a surprised, thick French accent. I'm sorry, you what? Yes, I'm locked in a stairwell. He had no idea where I was, so they sent security to find me. The building is huge. As I waited on the phone, hoping security would track me down, through the door's window I saw a young staffer walking toward me. It was almost certainly a soundproof door, but I started hitting it anyway, hoping the faint noise would get through. She walked past and my heart sank, but I kept banging on the door more frantically now. Hello? To my surprise, she stopped, turned her head in confusion. She looked at me like I was some sort of thief trying to break in, but then quickly adjusted her demeanor and opened the door. I gasped in relief, thanking her and begging her to point me in the direction of room 025B. She laughed lightly and pointed me in the right direction. Disaster averted again. Despite the frantic rush, when I finally made it to the committee room, it was almost empty except for a few support staff. The clerk hurried over and told me the whole thing had been delayed 40 minutes due to a vote in another meeting. Unbelievable. I should have known. Typical government. Right? These fuck. Alright, whatever. Never mind, bro. Never mind. I sat down at my little name tag in the room, watching people shuffle in, including a CTV camera crew and a CBC journalist. Most people desperately avoided making eye contact with me, though I caught them staring or whispering when they thought I wasn't looking. It's hard to describe what the House of Commons felt like. There was a spiritual drain on the entire building, and emptiness, like the place had been suffocating under years of black mold festering in the walls. It wasn't just a spiritual sickness. You could see in the people working there. I don't mean this cruelly, but I've rarely encountered so many visibly unhealthy people in one place. There was a kind of dullness, a lifelessness that felt deeper than stress. It made me wonder if the toxic environment, the apathy, the disconnect from consequence was seeping into their bodies as much as their minds. I'm just thinking, if I was Lauren and someone told me, oh, you're about to testify live, just be yourself. Would that actually work? I don't know if they actually believe in it at that time. You can't think too hard when you're doing that kind of work or it will break you. I've learned that much in political media myself. The most deliberate decision they seem to put into their job is in the morning, when they slip on their jackets and decide which tie or gold-plated pin to wear as an accessory. My thoughts on this were affirmed to horrifying levels when the meeting finally began. I wish I were joking, but when each politician shuffled in, well past the scheduled start time, they were completely incapable of staying on topic. The first half hour of the meeting was monopolized by Member of Parliament Pam Damoff, who was determined to pass some sort of motion to stop the spread of hate speech in Minecraft and Roblox. What the fuck? No way. That's no way. Pam Damoff, Minecraft, Roblox. Minecraft. Alright. Well, it's including. Alright. Okay. Interesting. I couldn't imagine how this could possibly be a priority in our country right now. It actually made me quite angry that it was a discussion at all. I could understand a more constructive discussion about limiting youth exposure to media in general, such as recent social media ban for kids implemented in Australia. However, this felt entirely like political posturing, and from the way these politicians spoke, I'm not sure anyone even knew what Roblox was. It's worth noting that games like Roblox and Minecraft already have built-in filters for slurs, threats, and other harmful content. Anyone with even a basic understanding of the internet knows that when politicians try to legislate on technology they don't fully grasp, the outcome is usually a disaster. The four conservatives in the room exchanged increasingly apologetic looks, one of them muttering under his breath, "Welcome to the House of Commons." Hey yo! While I tried to stifle my laughter at the absurdity unfolding before me, I caught Pam Damoff glaring at me, muttering to her colleague, Jen O'Connell, "Oh, she's just loving this, isn't she?" I was, in fact, loving it. My heart had been racing a million miles an hour, expecting to give my speech at any moment, and honestly, I have to thank Mrs. Damoff for giving me a chance to settle my nerves with the sheer silliness of it all. Apparently, it was the speaker's first or second day on the job, because he spent most of the meeting being tutored on how to do his job. A good portion of the session was consumed by people in the room having no clue how things were supposed to work, let alone what the roles were and how they were supposed to perform them. These are the people running my country. It all made sense now. At least the conservatives seemed self-aware enough to recognize the farce. New votes kept being called on the Minecraft and Roblox issue, with conservative MPs desperately begging to move on to something more relevant. I couldn't help but watch as staffers huddled around their bosses, trying to steer the conversation. One staffer, about my age, looked like he was on the verge of losing it. "Sir, they've been talking about hate speech and Roblox," he said exasperately, his frustration evident. His boss was only just beginning to grasp the embarrassing nature of the situation. Each conservative voted no, while every Liberal and NDP member voted yes. Honestly, it was hard to tell what, if anything, came of it. Finally, the speaker looked at me and announced to the room that everyone has 6 minutes each to ask me questions. Someone chimed in to remind him I still needed to make an opening statement. It was hard to believe that the only reason I was present at all was because these spoons would charge me with a crime if I didn't show up. I know I'm supposed to be working on my humility. I did think about that before making my speech. I am a broken human being. I have failed so many times in my life. What right do I have to call anyone an incompetent spoon? I shouldn't come in guns blazing, right? No. This was perhaps the one place, the last place I could hold onto any shred of pride. Politics is a sick world and it made me sick too, but I never let my ego justify charging others for refusing to speak to me. I had been part of this twisted machine, trapped in a kind of spiritual rot, and now here I was in the heart of Mordor. I was going to give it the middle finger before I painstakingly dragged myself out. And I did. Humility is important and should be cultivated daily. However, I no longer confuse humility, kindness, or introspection with weakness, cowardice, or self-hatred. By understanding when I'm wrong, I can also more clearly recognize when I'm right. I can confidently say that no one in that national security hearing room had even a fraction of the knowledge they did on the subject at hand, but their ignorance was expected. Politicians are handed hundreds of pages to review and vote on every day. They don't study them. Most don't fully understand the topics they debate, often not even the basics. Their staffers pull notes together using tools like ChatGPT and Wikipedia, then pass them along, ideally with 15 minutes to spare for a quick briefing. But because politics is a game of power, no one can afford to appear unprepared. So they enter the room with last-minute summaries and speak with the confidence of an expert. I had always suspected this was true, but experiencing it firsthand with a subject I had lived and breathed for the last 10 years solidified this analysis to a horrifying degree. They were, without a doubt, utterly clueless. A significant portion of the panel seemed to believe that the Russian government was providing talking points to the journalists at Tenet Media. They appeared to think that Tenet Media was attempting to influence Canadian opinions at the behest of the Russian government. Additionally, they seemed convinced that Tenet Media had amassed millions of followers and was poised to seriously impact public opinion in elections in the country. None of this was true. Tenet likely would have preferred I never made any Canadian videos at all. Canadian content simply doesn't draw the same viewership as American topics. But since Tenet had no control over the content I created, I would jot down ideas in my notes app about things that were bothering me that week, often while watching reruns of Emily in Paris, and that would end up being my video the next day. It's hard not to scream into a pillow when I think about taxpayers possibly spending upwards of $1 million on an investigation into my random, entirely self-generated video ideas. Generally convinced they were some kind of foreign operation to influence Canadians, I would have said the same thing regardless. None of this really mattered though, because nobody watched Tenet Media anyway. It was a flop of a company. Shockingly, a previous expert witness in the security hearing claimed that Tenet hosted the #1 podcast in the world, The Rubin Report, which it didn't. David Rubin's actual show at Tenet barely received a few hundred views, if that. None of the MPs, not even the Conservatives, questioned his statement. The company was, in the end, a failure. As they predicted, it was glaringly obvious that not a single elected official in that room had ever watched a piece of content produced by Tenet Media. I'm equally positive not a single one of them had ever even heard of the company before it suddenly showed up in headlines. They didn't care though. As previously stated, they needed it to appear successful for their narrative of Russians controlling all their critics. That said, I won't fault everyone equally. Some of the members, particularly the Conservatives and Bloc Québécois, were generally open to understand the topic from my perspective. The Liberals and NDP, on the other hand, let's just say arrogance is a poor substitute for doing the homework. With no real evidence of my video content being foreign controlled, Pam Damoff decided to pivot hard, accusing me of bigotry for interviewing Alexander Dugin. The irony, that interview was entirely my idea, personally arranged and financed, and focused on transhumanism and religion, not exactly an FSB recruitment tape. Unsurprisingly, she seemed unaware of this, and also unaware that Steve Piken, one of Canada's most respected liberal journalists, had interviewed Dugin too. When I pointed that out, she admitted she hadn't known but insisted, without missing a beat, "We know your interviews weren't the same." She then accused me of going to Russia to spread anti-Semitism, which was so wildly off-base that I laughed out loud during the hearing. I mean, is that really what the voters of Oakville, North Burlington signed up for? I think not. It was clear she hadn't seen my interview or Piken's or anything else I'd done. Frankly, I doubt she knew who I was beyond whatever notes were handed to her. Still, she wrapped things up by declaring me an affront to liberal democracy. Next up was NDP MP Gord Johns, who asked with a straight face, "What responsibility do you think individuals like yourself bear in preventing foreign influence?" A fair question, if we weren't literally sitting in the same room as Liberal MP Jennifer O'Connell, who had actively voted against investigating foreign interference. I replied, I think it's a bit rich to be asked what I should be doing as a private citizen to stop foreign interference when we're sharing a room with MPs like Jennifer O'Connell, who literally said boo-hoo to cause for exposing politicians potentially working for foreign governments. Our eyes locked across the room as she scoffed and shuffled her notes. Yes, she really did said that in a public hearing, and to a microphone, on the record. That was her rebuttal. To her credit, she stayed quiet after that. When it came time for her questions, she was the only member who opted out, despite having spoken up quite forcefully in every other tenant-related hearing before this one. Interesting shift. The whole thing felt like a joke. I have no institutional power, yet here I was being grilled on national security by people who actively block transparency when it threatens their own party. If this had been a sketch, it would have been rejected for being too on the nose. As mentioned earlier, previous witnesses to the committee had blatantly misrepresented numbers and analytics related to tenant media. It was almost too easy to point out how the committee had hearings on disinformation campaigns in Canada itself was unable to even control the flow of disinformation within its own walls. The hypocrisy was glaring, almost painful to witness, but instead of confronting it, they just moved on. O'Connell chose to pretend I wasn't even there. Despite having 2 full hours to question me, the committee wrapped up halfway through, claiming they had nothing left to ask. Even some of my staunchest liberal friends admitted it wasn't an inquiry, but a theater. A parade of politicians too caught up in their egos to realize how out of depth they were. But they'll never admit it, because doing so would mean questioning the very system that gives them power. A system that is sometimes designed to hurt the very people they represent. I knew I'd be cast as the bad guy, even though, at least in that room, it was clear I wasn't. But someone had to wear the target, better me than them having to face what they've actually done. I got up and walked out of the meeting, furious, marching to the courtroom as 2 young women ran after me, visibly shaken, asking for my number to pass on to their MPs. A CBC journalist handed me her card and apologized for the way I'd been treated by CSIS, something I also made a point of in the hearing. I worked my way through the maze of hallways until I stood outside in the cold, dark November evening. 2 security guards flanked me. I just let the moment sink in and smiled to myself. I did it. I knew I wouldn't be hearing from their agents again, at least not for a while. They couldn't make a fucking example of me, and if they tried, even if I went down, I'd make sure they felt it. I go down clawing, teeth bared, gouging, eyes out. I might not always win the scrap, but I leave scars. I went straight back to the hotel and ordered a steak to celebrate. My phone rang non-stop. Friends calling to praise me for my performance, showering me with affirmation. I appreciated it, I really did. It was comforting for a moment, but I was cautious. I knew how easy it would be to fall back into old habits. Just one night of psychologically feasting on the comment section of marinade and the praise could undo months of work. I told myself I'd be careful. I brushed my teeth, changed into pajamas, did the little routine like I was, keeping the monster at bay. But between each task, I caught myself picking up my phone, just a glance, then another. By the time I crawled into bed, I was curled up, cozy, reassured by the illusion that I was still in control. It would be fun, just one more peek before I sleep. I earned it, hadn't I? I forgot how good the drug was. This wasn't just doom scrolling, this was God mode scrolling. The best kind of scrolling because it was all about me. The little narcissist I'd been starving for months was suddenly at an all-you-can-eat buffet, and she didn't care if the comments were praise or vitriol, she devoured it all. My mind began spiraling. How many celebrities have been cancelled and come back bigger? I could do that too. Look how much people love this. I had just taken on the entire freaking government. I could remake myself. Smarter, hotter, untouchable. Blow up my channel again. Outplay the haters, get revenge. I opened YouTube, then Twitter, Reddit, Instagram. The comment sections were endless rivers of dopamine and bile. She bodied them. This is the girl I've been defending for years. Finally someone said it. This bitch is still around? She's just mad no one wants her anymore. Icon, snake, wife me, hang her. My eyes were glowing. I couldn't look away. Scrolling, tapping, scrolling. Lauren Southern. What is she doing? Where is she going? She's a whore. She's a hero. She's my dream woman. She's a nightmare. 1,000 strangers clawing out the edges of my identity. My thumb moved faster, like it had a mind of its own. The glow of the screen lit up the hotel room, casting blue shadows across the walls. I felt electric, possessed, then snapped. I slammed the phone down on the bed. The spacious room was dark and quiet. The curtains shifted slightly in the breeze from the vent, and the glow of the city outside sliced across the white comforter. I blinked disoriented. Where was I again? What time is it? Here, alone, just me, and the echo of 100,000 strangers in my head. I stared at the ceiling, finding the urge to reach for the phone again. Eventually, the current running through me slowed, and I drifted off to sleep. The next day, I packed my bags and headed to the airport, my flight booked on the government's dime, or rather, the taxpayers, funding this whole circus. Just another person in the check-in line, wedged between retirees and screaming toddlers. I didn't even want to touch my phone. It felt gross. Like I come off a bender I swore I was done with. At the gate, I felt nothing. On the plane, the same. Just going through the motions, running out to come down from yesterday's high. But the second the wheels touched down, somewhere deep in my body, something registered. It's over. No more speeches, no more performances, just me heading home. When I got into the Uber, I didn't say much, just nodded, put in my headphones, and stared out the window, desperate for some peace. The Canadian landscape full of mountains and trees blurred past, and somewhere along the drive, tears started slipping down my cheeks. At first, I whipped them away quickly, unsure if the driver noticed, but eventually, even that concern faded. My body had taken over. It had waited too long for this. The battle was over. No more agents, no more testimonies, no more drama dragged up from the depths. But it wasn't just that. It was years of sleepless nights, terrified the wrong knock at the door would come for me or my son. My name passed between government offices, treated like a threat. My home, my gym, no longer private. Friends selling me out every time I let someone in. I watched my life turn to a spectacle. Vulnerability broadcast to strangers like it was entertainment, and through it all, I had to smile, explain, maintain. Keep the brand alive. Even the man I married turned on me. Fuck him, by the way. And there was no time to grieve, no time to mourn anything. I was too busy trying to survive. It had all erupted, and now there was nothing left to hold together. Years of suppression unraveled all at once. For the first time, I truly felt it. The tears kept coming, steady and unrelenting. I was finally safe alone, allowed to fall apart, finally able to admit the truth. I had become so deeply mentally ill. It wasn't all my fault. The world I was in had very little grace and even less guidance. But I was still the one responsible for keeping my soul intact, and somewhere along the way I stopped doing that. Last night I saw more clearly than I ever had. I watched the version of myself I had been suffocating under a pillowcase these last 3 months rear its ugly head again. But the part that was starving for love but kept looking for it in all the wrong places. The part that confused attention with affection. I didn't want to be anyone's hero or villain anymore. I had played that role for the last decade, and the only reason I could be a hero in anyone's eyes yesterday was because the House of Commons was perhaps one of the few places on earth I still had the moral high ground. Only because the people present had set the bar so low. The truth is, I didn't have the moral high ground on anyone else. Certainly not if I started believing I was somehow ingenious for standing up to a group of politicians who would forget my name by next week. Since Tenet blew up, I've been offered chances to start over, dream jobs really, full funding to make films again, direct, even star in them, and offered to help in a management role with content creation. I needed the money, I needed the stability, but more than that, I needed to say no. It wasn't fear exactly, more like reverence. Like I finally understood there's a cost to ignoring your soul, a cost to pretending you're God. The only path forward was to let go of the version of me that was living on applause instead of oxygen. The one replaying clips in bed, basking in attention, scrolling through comments that called me perfection and dirt, a robot self built on pixels. I cried with relief because in finally naming it, I knew I still had a chance to fix my mind. Staying present, I could see the monster I built at 19 creeping back in, tempting me to spiral again. To chase glory, to rewrite the record, tempting me to hate myself based on the opinions of people I never meet, or to love myself, but only because they love me. None of this is real. This is not real life. I don't know these people, and they don't know me. I cry because I finally realized how long I've been listening to all the wrong voices. I realized how deeply I cared about the actual life, the kind that exists in shared moments and imperfections. How much I love the people in that life, my son, my friends, my family. I finally understood that I can't love them well if I'm not well myself, and that beginning this process of healing might be the most important thing I ever do. I got as far as I could in the material and digital worlds and it nearly broke me. It was time to go inward, the place the whole dream had been leading to all along. I wasn't getting those 10 years back. That hit me in a way it never had before. I thought about the friendships that slipped away, the people I'd hurt, the signs I ignored when I could have chosen differently. There was regret, yes, but there was a gratitude too. Deep down, I knew I wouldn't have learned these lessons any other way. I still had time. There's always time. Time with my son. Time to show up better for the people who stood by me. Time to build something real. I wasn't proud of every version of myself, but I was proud I could see clearly now. Not sure what route the driver took, but somewhere between the airport and home, I found my soul worth the surcharge. Ooh, and chapter 27. There's I think 2 more. Just 2 more chapters. Damn, bro, my head is like airy right now, bro. You know what? We can at this point, whoever reads this book, they can start drawing some like life lessons from her, right? Because she's basically telling the whole world her mistake that I think a lot of other people would have done the same thing as. It's quite deep, right? It's kind of hard to elaborate, but You know, right? It's hard to say out loud, but you already know in your mind what it is, basically. Alright, so chapter 27 is called Inscape. Several months have passed since I stopped posting it on social media. Today, I spent my time walking into the woods with a shovel to dig. Well, for you ask, not to bury a body, I swear, just to fetch my old hard drives. As you know, when the Fed shut down tenants, I was convinced I had broken sanctioned laws. My lawyers warned me an arrest was possible, so I went off-grid and started writing in a notebook instead of posting on X. Flipping through it now, I'm laughing at one entry, knowing the new habit of posting on mascara before bed, just in case. God forbid I get arrested in my jammies and miss the chance to make it on mugshotties. The rest were just semi-schizo ramblings about my theories on where everything was headed. As for burying the strives, I know it sounds unhinged, but it wasn't about hiding evidence. It was about keeping something for myself. I had government seats and sniffed my devices before, digging through every message, every file as if my life were public property. I couldn't stomach that again. This time, I wanted one part of my story to remain mine alone. It was a quiet act of defiance, not against law, but against the idea that I didn't deserve privacy. I lifted the rock and started digging, getting flashbacks to the absolutely manic state I was in when I buried them. It already feels like a lifetime ago. Eventually, my shovel struck the double-wrapped Pelican case. I hauled it out, kicked the dirt back into place, and walked to my Jeep, wondering what this little trick was really for. I think I need to confirm that all actually happened, that my life wasn't just some fever dream or psychological spiral, but a real story. When I got home, I made a cup of tea like I was about to open a time capsule, all very serious and ceremonial. Naturally, by the time I remembered the ridiculous string of passwords I used to encrypt the drives, the tea was cold. Eventually, I cracked them open and started sifting through the old photos and videos, curious to see what feelings would surface. I scrolled through the thumbnails before deep diving into anything too seriously. The media galleries didn't even look like me. Who is this girl, all dressed up to talk on TV? The family ones feel haunted. I haven't seen my ex-husband in years, and yet there he is, frozen in time, a familiar stranger. It all feels so distant now. Back then, I believe video was the truest medium. What could be more honest than showing people exactly what you saw? But video only captures what's outside. The real story is the inscape. Inscape, a term coined by Jerome Manley Hopkins, describes something deeper than what's on the surface. The psychological inner experience of the world. A camera can suggest death, but it still captures the performance. Even with narration, interviews, or so-called candid moments, no one is fully honest on camera. Not because they're lying, but because the format itself can't hold the whole truth. A video is just a moment, a snapshot, a fragment of thought, rarely unedited, and never capturing fully who someone was nor who they're becoming. Only I can really see when I was faking it in these photos. A frame can't show the difference. I have about 5 drives, each sticker labeled with different dates and years. I plugged in one from the peak of my career and took a sip of tea. Should have called this one Me, starring me, directed by me, instead of 2018 Me Archive. Perfect makeup, stiff poses, smiles that didn't reach my eyes, photos with people I barely cared to be around, from events I didn't even remember agreeing to. At first glance, it looked like a successful life, but the deeper I scrolled, the more it started to resemble a conspiracy board. Screenshots, message logs, voice notes with timestamps, folders labeled things like contingency, remember this, or just names and locations with ominous subfolders. I used to take photos of my hedgehogs, sunset, cool architecture. Now I was archiving people like they were potential liabilities, documenting conversations I didn't trust, saving proof I hope I never need. What started as memory became strategy. The whole camera roll felt like a diary written in code, just in case things ever went sideways again. Oh, and they had. Of course they had, but none of my paranoia could have stopped it anyway, which made me chuckle to myself while scrolling through all my catalogs of contingency plans, yet again trying to get ahead of narratives I didn't control. All while working for a company I was pretty sure was accelerating the chaos, decoding political power plays like it was my full-time job. And sure, I had my reasons. I needed to support my kid, totally normal mom stuff. Honestly, it's like I'd never seen a single movie in my life. Who did I think I was? Walter White. I shut my laptop and put the drives away, though not before deleting about 1,000 selfies that made me physically cringe. Still digging them up felt like closure I hadn't known I was longing for, a proper goodbye. Rest in peace, Lauren Southern. Alright, so that was a short chapter. Next chapter is chapter 28. You know what? I'm gonna just finish the book actually. What remains? Miss Lauren, I looked up. Back in the classroom, erasing the chalkboard now, not hard drives. The name still caught me by surprise. I don't have a shadow. I love people. I'm kind to others. She was a sweet kid. I smiled. Having a shadow doesn't make you a bad person. If anything, knowing you have one helps you be better. Do you ever do anything not so good at all? She thought for a moment. I guess I get angry sometimes. Right, I said, snapping into motion. I walked to the counter to grab the scales. At first, I tried using chalk, but as soon as I placed one piece on the scale, it collapsed. I looked around. The kids, without missing a beat, handed me the colorful wool balls they've been working with. Soon I had a little pile. Okay, let me just pause. She just said something, alright? She asked the kid a question. Do you ever do anything not so good at all? But when she's saying that like as if she wants to tell them about her life, right? Except she can't tell the full. So she like puts it onto the question. But isn't that like not projecting in a way though? Because you're kind of like projecting your own thoughts, experiences, and your own like feelings onto others. I'm just saying. Alright, anyways. Okay, I begin. Let's say you get angry at someone for a good reason. They take something of yours or ruin a project you're working on. You blow up. I drop a wool ball on one side of the scale. Now let's say your usual sweet self and you say something kind to lift something up. I drop the ball on the other side. But what if you're given lots of reasons to be angry? Even though you're still doing sweet things, the anger starts piling up too. The wool ball stacked higher on the anger side and the scale fell. You become the anger monster. That could be your shadow. The room was quiet. The kids watched the scale. So, I said, we recognize that shadow. We pay attention. We don't let too many wool balls pile up in one place. They started listing things they needed to keep in check and traits they wanted to grow. And you know what's even better, I added. When we've got our shadow in check, we can use it. Sometimes a little anger in the right context can push us to make brave choices. Sounds kind of like Machiavelli's sort of philosophy, isn't it? Alright, anyway. We wrapped up the class, the kids buzzing with excitement over their story ideas. I never thought I'd be the one teaching lessons on archetypes in storytelling, definitely not to a room full of kids. As I stacked my papers and smiled to myself, I remember how many friends had badgered me for years to go into teaching. I always told them it would never happen, too much baggage, too far from who I thought I was. And yet there I was, quietly walking back to my Jeep, reluctantly in love with every second of it. It was only once a week, but I poured hours into preparing for each class. It mattered more than I expected. I didn't even care if this was just a brief chapter in my life. If things eventually went back to how they were, I was just glad I had gotten this moment. In my 9 months off social media, I come to realize a few things about myself. Not just that I secretly loved teaching, because it was everything I used to enjoy about content creation, minus the ego, the comments, and the inflammatory nonsense. I also started making peace with parts of my own shadow, including the obvious. I have a personality that craves chaos. I needed somewhere to put it. When the ocean started warming up and took the sting out of my morning cold plunges, I found myself chasing the next hit elsewhere. I still swim, but I also picked up sports 4 days a week. No one at my gymnastics class knows who I am, which is nice, though honestly, I wouldn't care if they did. Most people care less than you think. I told the group I play sports so I don't commit crimes. Most of them have some form of ADHD, and we laugh about being our collective outlet. Somewhere in the middle of all this, I realized I stopped smoking weed, not intentionally, just the urge quietly disappeared. It's all been extraordinarily ordinary in the best possible way. The strangest thing really is just the constant sense that another world still exists, running parallel to mine. The unreality is always out there, lurking, like upside down in Stranger Things, invisible until it breaks through. I'll be at a pub and overhear people at the next table confidently discussing events I actually lived through, or people I know getting every detail wrong. Or I get a sudden email from a journalist sniffing around just the other day. A man stopped me on the street. "Are you that girl Laura Southern?" I smiled and said, "Who? Never heard of her." He looked confused. I laughed, shook his hand, and told him to have a good day. I may have escaped for now, but I still see the glitch at the edges of reality, and I know writing this book has the potential to stir it all up again. Teaching and coaching sports has made me think more deeply about the younger generations. Gen Z's apathy isn't laziness, it's survival. They're raised entirely online, overstimulated, overwhelmed, forced into public opinions on issues they barely understand, under threat of cancellation or ostracism. They've been told to change the world, even if that just means posting a black square or flag on social media, gestures they know are hollow. Is it any surprise they shut down, numb out, and fracture their minds, and fracture mine? I remember a world before iPhones, and yet they still capture so much of my life. I didn't realize how bad it was until I tried to quit. It's not like quitting drugs or drinking where everyone cheers you on highs the wine. No, my friends and family might as well have shown up at my door every day with a crack pipe in hand saying, "Hey, try this new stuff I found. It's top shelf, tailored just for you." Only instead of substances, it's curated chaos, viral gossip, rage bait news, addictive content perfectly designed to drag me back into the rabbit holes I just clawed my way out of. As if that weren't enough, I also been endlessly encouraged to continue my social media career. Thousands of emails and colleagues asking, "When are you getting back on stage?" We love that. Imagine telling a recovering crack addict, "We love you best when you're on crack." Imagine being paid to relapse. I'm half joking, but only half, because this new digital world doesn't know how to leave people alone. Social media success is a status symbol. Being constantly up to date is expected. People mean well, but I think most have forgotten what well actually is. It's even harder to stay clean when the content isn't distant, when it's people I know, events I was part of, stories I lived through. Amidst the chaos of the inauguration, I found myself mindlessly scrolling through X again, only to see Tommy Robinson being hailed as an unmitigated hero. Andrew Tate being praised by Elon Musk and Trump's lawyer, as well as all the other circus acts. It wasn't even the misguided worship of personalities that got to me. I've seen enough of that. What bothered me was seeing people I respected and once considered intelligent getting every detail wrong, refusing to read court cases, misleading audiences, oversimplifying, pontificating, and maybe that stung most because I'd done it too. I get it. We all want heroes to be real because we all want to be saved. I suppose it's also because we can't look away. The relentless drive to maintain an identity in the public consciousness, no matter the cost, is its own kind of spectacle. Ruined lives, sex, drugs, riots, prison sentences is undeniably fascinating. These little Greek gods running around with their worshippers, just a vacuum for true connection with divinity and a higher purpose, repeated endlessly through time. I've been reading the Old Testament, can't help but notice the repetitions of human behavior. Moses leaves for the mountaintop to receive the 10 Commandments, and within like 5 minutes the Israelites are worshipping a golden calf. Make us gods who shall go before us, they said, because they had no idea where Moses had gone. If we can't engage with the solution physically, it seems to cease to exist in our minds. Worshipping influencers is no less absurd. At least the golden calf was symbolic, an image of strength and virality. It didn't have a rap sheet of crimes, court dates, and scandals proving it couldn't live up to what it represented. And yet we still praise those same traits in modern-day golden calves. We know they're flawed, we just don't care because we're afraid to believe in nothing. Not realizing that clinging to whatever loudest, easiest, and most visible is believing in nothing, just with better lighting. A godbout doesn't cause invite me to the inauguration. Free tickets, flights paid for, hotel sorted, good connections. Friends couldn't understand why I said no, but they respected it. I drew a line. Although I discovered pretty quickly that just because I skipped the circus didn't mean the clowns couldn't climb through my screen. I tried sweating it out, distancing myself with new healthy habits. But the trending topics kept sending me down a rabbit hole. So one night after gymnastics, I decided I was fed up, kicked my shoes off, sat myself down on the couch, tossed the hard drives of my past aside, and decided it was time to take the future seriously. I opened it back into my social media and started banning every political keyword like I was setting up a toddler's iPad, lest I spiral into relapse. And yes, I bought the avocado toast of self-help books. Atomic Habits, and yes, I needed James Clear to tell me make good habits easy and bad habits hard. About 1,000 different ways before it finally stuck. Sue me. For about a week, I'd start by morning my spooning eggs into my mouth with one hand and reading another chapter of painfully obvious life advice with the other, then continue on the mission of addict-proofing my devices. I've said it already, but changing my settings to block notifications from accounts with a verified email genuinely changed my life. It cut out 90% of the noise. Also, discovered my violent content filter had been off for months. Fixed that too. I wish I could say scrolling through my algorithmic topics on X gave me some deep insight into my subconscious, but they weren't a reflection of what I wanted. They were a reflection of what the platform wanted me to want. The dealer had just laced the drug with something stronger. I never searched for Belle Delphine, Tinder, or whatever breeders was supposed to mean. I was honestly too scared to find out, but they were front and center in my suggestions. Okay, that's kind of, well, okay. Damn, bro. Because she's a single mother, right? Or anyways. I muted words like Trump, Trudeau, and every slur on scandal that's trended on a Tuesday. It didn't help. The rage bait just shape-shifted into wordless videos. So I muted almost every political personality I follow, nothing personal. For a while, the algorithm just flailed, throwing girls in lingerie, edgy jokes, and whatever outrage bait it could scrape up from accounts I've never even followed. I kept being not interested, wondering how long it would take before my timeline showed me anything remotely good for the soul. It was time to start throwing everything to the wall to win this war, even experimenting with things I used to mock, like daily affirmations. Turns out they kinda help. I missed some mornings, but I tried to make time to write down what I needed to remember. I am honest, I forgive, I seek wisdom, because if I didn't set that intention, I'd slip back into scrolling, gossip, the slow motion train wrecks of strangers' worst moments, digital junk food. Okay. And then, alright, thankfully, Christ's judgment is far more merciful than that of his self-proclaimed soldiers online. As the months passed without posting and my algorithm settled into increasingly boring content, clarity started to seep back in again. enough clarity to realize that falling off the wagon had always been, and probably always will be, part of my nature. Feeding the ego, chasing the highs. It's true for most of us, I think. I sit in cafes for hours, listening to music, writing out chapters of this book. Wonder how I was ever going to finish it. What's the ending? You can't really end the story with, I'm not dead yet. I'm not healed. That's the continuous journey. What if I show up back on everyone's feed 2 years ago, from now unraveling some new ridiculous way? Maybe I'll be doing crack in the green room with some up-and-coming podcast host, or doing espionage for Iran. If I learned anything, it was that taking your hands off the wheel of your soul can lead to all sorts of ridiculous destinations. Though I suppose truth doesn't stop being true just because the person who spoke it can't live up to it. Perhaps I'm not in any position to speak any large truths, just the truth of what has happened in my own life, just my own story, writing it all down as a safeguard against my own selective memory, so I don't forget the lessons I learned at rock bottom. Notes to myself, made public, because if I don't keep myself in check, who will? The internet? The masses? Good joke. At least when we fed people to the lions, we were honest about what we were doing. Now we dress up our spiritual sickness as moral reckoning. I'm not talking about real accountability for crime, abuse, or actual harm. Of course that matters. I'm talking about the obsessive ritual of punishing strangers for things buried in the past, or for moments we never lived through and barely understand. It's performative, antisocial, yet somehow it's become normal. And the consequences, subtle and visible until they aren't. By the time most people realize they should have logged off to salvage their humanity, it's already slipping through their fingers. I know that well enough. I knew all the excuses that kept me from making the leap even better. I can't just ignore what's online. It's where the world is now, where reputations are built, careers are made. Perhaps that's true. But where did that notion lead? I spent countless nights smoking spliffs on my back deck, pondering that very question. Is there a world where the digital version of ourselves matters most? What if people really did start to think the way I thought for the last 10 years? We haven't even begun to see the real reckoning there. Just wait until Gen Z starts running for political office. Those elections are going to be wild. Old tweets, OnlyFans, leaked news, high school drama, local crime reports, emo TikTok, failed extremist podcasts, all archived, all searchable, all deliciously addictive. All I could come back to the idea was the idea of forgiveness. After everything I saw, all I could come up with was that no movement, no ideology, no vision for the future could thrive without forgiveness. No one lives up to their ideals all the time, not the leaders, not the critics, not me. I watched both myself and everyone around me crumble under impossible standards, while others hurl judgments from the safety of anonymity. And somewhere in the noise, it hit me that we've built a culture convinced that everyone else is beyond saving. That personal change is the myth, and redemption is for the naive. We archive every mistake, every misstep, living the past more than the present. We built our own hell, Dante's frozen lake, scaled for the digital age where everyone is trapped in place, minds locked in judgment, memory, and fear. We better figure out fast how to say, I don't care, that's not who I am anymore, or there is truly no path forward. We've all fallen victim to this digital archive eventually. Maybe there's something beautiful to that though. C.S. Lewis once said, pain is God's megaphone to ruse a deaf world. Suffering at the hands of the digital Colosseum was a strange gift to free me from it. I also heard it said that the doors of hell are locked from the inside. The thought made me smile. It felt truer by the day. I began to hear their voices trying to keep me there, 1,000 digital whispers insisting the key didn't exist. My own demons wore the faces of clickbait, AI bots, nasty comments, addictive reels, and endless melodrama, each whispering that I was either irredeemable or already perfect, so why bother trying to change? The more I thought about that frozen lake, the more I saw it everywhere, and my own comments both good and bad. Worthless, skank, heroic Valkyrie. Same result, stagnation, same trap. And it wasn't just the stuff about me. The same psychological poison, all the content. Find signs you're too high value to settle. Why no one deserves you. These people are beyond saving. How to win by cutting everyone off. Different tone, same lie. Don't grow, don't forgive, don't love. Just protect your ego and call it empowerment. Logging off hasn't been easy. It was just the first step. The realization that I've been living in a maze of algorithms, drama, and silly little dopamine loops. The hard part has been untangling it. As I build a life offline that feels worth being present for, the internet has started losing its grip. I've started feeling like a person again, not an audience member, a brand, or someone LARPing as part of a movement on platform designed for ads, cat videos, and intelligence propaganda. Just a regular human with a nervous system, maybe even a bit of peace. I keep getting told publishers want a redemption arc. They don't know how to sell a story without one. But there is no clean arc here, no grand finale. It doesn't work like that. There's no scene where I ride off into the sunset healed, game better. It turns out it's kind of boring. It's a quiet victory, a melancholic morning where I don't reach for my phone but instead listen to the pitter-patter of rain on the roof, where I feel the warmth beneath my sheets and stretch my body gently, and for once there's no void to fill. Just presence. quiet moments with my son nestled in my arms, reading from fantasy novels I once loved as a child. An evening spent playing cards with family while the TV remote gathers dust in the next room. A day where I forget the chaos of the world and look up at the clouds with childlike wonder. Grateful for the moment I'm in and the life I'm living rather than trying to escape it. And sometimes joy crashes in out of nowhere. Like diving off the dock with friends in the middle of the night, stripped down to our underwear, cannonballing into freezing water under a sky full of stars, screaming from the cold, laughing so hard we can't breathe. Nothing captured, nothing posted, only lived. There is no viral moment, just a quiet return to something we once had. Maybe in a world like this, that's the most radical thing you can do. That is the end of the book, and we are now on the epilogue. This book is not complete. I must admit that there are a few chapters missing, fairly significant ones. While I wrote them, they were for my own mental processing rather than for public consumption. There are a few reasons for leaving them out. First, out of respect for those who haven't chosen to make themselves a spectacle or willingly enter the public discourse, I've excluded them from those pages out of love. In other cases, to fully explain my own failures or actions would require revealing shortcomings of others who weren't relevant to the arc of the story, or whose pain doesn't belong here, and some chapters are still unfolding. I don't yet have the benefit of hindsight or a clear sense of where those paths will lead. Perhaps in the future I will write more on these subjects. Now on to my final thoughts. I truly believe our minds are being sold to the highest bidder, and that politics isn't the path to real change that many believe it is. Technology is being wielded to distort our perception of reality, and in the end, it won't matter if our digitally curated governments are red or blue. They have no souls. But in the midst of all this, we still have a choice to remain human, to refuse to surrender our own souls. I'm convinced that a choice is more powerful than most people realize. It's worth a lifetime of dedication to truth, love, and reality. I open and close this book with a reference to Dante's Inferno, because much of the story has been about my own descent into metaphorical hell. The ninth circle is a symbol of what happens when a soul gets locked in its own story, endlessly repeating a moment it can't let go of. The breakdown I experienced at the beginning of this journey wasn't destruction, it was my mind waking up after years of being frozen. I've got a lot of rewiring to do, a lot of re-evaluating my relationships with everything in my life. Dante's Inferno is a powerful spiritual journey, if you understand it as an allegory, not literal prophecy. A reminder some evangelicals seem to miss when they threaten detractors with pitchfork and flames. But another portrayal of hell I find even more poignant in C.S. Lewis' The Great Divorce. I know I've revealed my obsession with Lewis in this book, but humor me one more time. The Great Divorce imagines a series of conversations between souls in heaven and hell, though neither group quite understands their role by those names. In Lewis' version, hell is a place you can leave at any time, but when you're hollow, lacking spiritual weight, the solid beauty of heaven becomes unbearable. The grass cuts like razor blades beneath your feet. The only way to solidify as a soul is to walk toward the mountains. Walk through pain, through surrender, until you gain the capacity for joy. Of all the souls in the book, only one ghost manages to stay in heaven. He appears with the lizard on his shoulder, small, red, whispering constantly in his ear. The lizard represents lust, the ghost's lifelong master. An angel approaches and offers to silence it, but the ghost balks when he hears the angel's real plan, to kill it. The exchange is agonizing. The lizard insists they'll both die if it is destroyed. The ghost stalls, negotiates, resists. Finally, broken desperate, he gives in, willing to be destroyed if that's what it takes to be free. The angel rips the lizard from his shoulder. The man screams. The lizard writhes, and then something miraculous happens. The ghost becomes a radiant being of light. The lizard transforms into a great white stallion. The man throws his arms around the creature's neck. They breathe into each other's nostrils. Then he mounts the horse and rides joyfully into the mountains. The message, of course, is that when you stop being ruled by your impulses and surrender to something greater than yourself, everything starts to shift. The energy that once sabotaged your life begins to line. It just takes the courage for change. Okay, you know what? I think that's how Lauren interprets it. I interpreted something completely different. I interpret that as something more holy and sacred rather than a life sort of like, oh, you know, not being ruled by your impulses and surrenders. I mean, yeah, it is. It's pretty alright too. It's everything's that energy. It's that energy that's okay. But like she makes it like it's more. It sounds more like it's for an ordinary person living their ordinary life here, rather than like a pathway to heaven, as what I see. Anyways, after reading this book, a good friend warned me not to throw the baby out with the bathwater when it came to my use of technology. I think my friend was right. Like the lizard in Lewis's allegory, the things that once whispered in your ear can be transformed if you're willing to let them go. The goal isn't to vanish into force forever, Unabomber style. It's about turning our tools back into instruments of purpose. I still spend long hours on my computer, but I no longer scroll into oblivion every night. I use it to write, to build something instead of dissolving into distraction. I still FaceTime with faraway friends, still send memes, and still laugh at the occasional reel. I'm also in conversation with few creators about forming more private communities online, with vetted real humans. These days, I'm rebuilding my relationship with tech on my own terms, less addiction and more intention. I have no judgment about where anyone else is at with social media. I just don't question my own sanity anymore when I see the absurdity for what it is. Curated little digital kingdoms of nothingness. It served its purpose for a time, but that time is over. And the rest is acknowledgments. All right. Good book, bro. I will recommend this book over any other book I have over, you know what? I don't read a lot of books actually, but that was a good book, all right? You know, cuz how many books out there do you have people writing about themselves, like being vulnerable, and they just say the truth. They expose everything. They literally say the fucking truth, what you want, you know? Anyways, if you read, bro, like who actually watches me reading this book though? I liked it. But you're probably asleep right now because my voice is so boring, bro.